Chapter 35:19. Yu Meng did not stay in the Hundred Spirit Continent for long. After confirming that Yang Kai's life was not in danger, she left in a hurry, as if she had something important to do. Yang Kai could not help but think of Mingyu, the great emperors. If there was anything that could make a demon saint so worried, it was most likely related to Mingyu. Yang Kai even thought that she might have sent him to the Cloud Shadow Continent, because she wanted to borrow his power to repair the World Gate, as she said, and also because she did not want him by her side. Although he had betrayed the star boundary in Yu Meng's eyes, he was born there after all. She might still be worried that he would be reluctant to leave his homeland. It was not that Yang Kai did not think of passing the news back to the star boundary and asking the great emperors to find a way to help Mingyu, but the passage between the two worlds was guarded by countless demon race, so it was impossible for him to return to the star boundary quietly. Thinking of the one-year agreement with Mingyu, Yang Kai felt his heart sink. When the time came, he would be the only one who could help Mingyu. However, Yang Kai was not sure if he could take him out of the demon territory, under the watch of the 12 demon saint. In fact, Yang Kai was not even sure if he could help him in any way. The battle between the great emperors and the demon saint was too high level. With his current second-order emperor realm cultivation, he was unable to intervene. The day after Yu Meng left, Chang Tian called Yang Kai over and had an open and honest talk. Indeed, as Yu Meng said, his original plan was to borrow Yang Kai's power to seal all the world gates in the Hundred Spirit Continent, creating the illusion that the entire continent was out of the demon territory. Of course, this separation was different from the previous continents that had disappeared. If the entire devil territory was a whole, then those continents felt like dead parts to Yang Kai. The disappearance of the portal caused those continents to gradually collapse and turn into pieces. Yang Kai used the power of space to seal the portal and took the initiative to hide the Hundred Spirit Continent. The two were completely different. After hiding, the Hundred Spirit Continent would not be in danger of collapsing, and the creatures here would not be affected by the other continents in the devil territory. However, after discovering Yang Kai's dragon race bloodline, Chang Tian changed his mind. He had wanted to do that before, because he could not see any hope. Although there were many half-saint creatures in the Hundred Spirit Continent, it was difficult for any of them to be of great use. At the very least, no one would be able to grow to the level where they could fight against the demon saint in the next 2,000 or 3,000 years. Once Long Tian passed away, no one would be able to shoulder the burden of the Hundred Spirit Continent. However, it was different now. A little light was ignited in the darkness, allowing Chang Tian to see hope again. Even though Yang Kai and Yu Meng were very close, he could not care so much. If he could entrust the Hundred Spirit Continent to her, it was undoubtedly what he wanted to see the most. It could even be said that it was because of Yang Kai and Yu Meng's close relationship that he was more confident in entrusting her. When the time came, even if Yang Kai's strength did not grow as expected, as long as Yu Meng helped him, the other demon saint would not ask for trouble. Yang Kai's words strengthened Chang Tian's determination in this regard. The portal could be sealed, but it could not guarantee that the Hundred Spirit Continent would disappear completely. This directly dispelled his initial plan. However, even so, the portal still needed to be sealed. There were 4 portals in the Hundred Spirit Continent. Chang Tian needed Yang Kai to seal 3 of them, leaving only 1. In this way, only 1 half-saint would be needed to guard the portal. It would not be like before, where the Hundred Spirit Continent had to send 4 half-saint to seal the portal at all times to prevent thieves from sneaking in. Yang Kai naturally had no reason to refuse. Instead, he was looking forward to it. If it wasn't for Chang Tian's reminder, he wouldn't have thought of this. He was already familiar with repairing and maintaining realm gates, but he had never done anything like sealing realm gates before. The main reason was that his thinking was a little dark. Furthermore, he didn't dare to act recklessly in the territory of those devil saints. If he really did so, it would definitely cause some trouble. However, the Hundred Spirit Continent had such a need. Perhaps this would give him some new inspiration on the law of space. Thinking of this, Yang Kai hurriedly left the dark and empty hall. Under the guidance of the Lotus Sisters, he set off for the nearest portal. Windchaser also found him and ran around randomly. Yang Kai fiercely scolded it before it finally stopped. The Lotus Sisters were frightened, although Windchaser had shown a very friendly attitude towards Yang Kai before, and was even willing to let him ride it. In fact, the entire 100-spirit continent knew that Windchaser was as arrogant as any half-saint. In the early years, after the 100-spirit continent was unified, a newly promoted half-saint was arrogant and provoked Windchaser. As a result, Windchaser chased that person for 3 whole years and knocked that person's cultivation level down from half-saint. That person had not recovered until now. What happened in the past was only a trivial matter, so trivial that the Lotus Sisters had already forgotten what it was. But this trivial matter had led to the desolation of a half-sage. Now there was actually someone who dared to reprimand Windchaser, and even made a move on him. However, Windchaser did not have much of a reaction. It was really unbelievable. Just because he had a similar bloodline to the master, he could be treated like this? Without Windchaser's interference, Yang Kai could finally focus on his research. Although he didn't think that sealing the realm gate would be difficult before, actually implementing it was completely different from maintaining and repairing it. It wasn't something that could be done simply by reversing the flow of the realm gate. It involved many things that he had never thought of. Sealing the realm gate really gave him a lot of new inspiration in the use of the space principles. After almost a month, Yang Kai finally had a clue. One day, the space principles suddenly fluctuated. The Lotus Sisters, who had been bored and cultivating on a mountain not far away, opened their eyes and looked up. In the next moment, the 2 sisters revealed looks of surprise. In the void, in front of the realm gate, Yang Kai stretched out his hand and spread his fingers, covering the huge realm gate. From his palm, the invisible power of principles dissipated. Like stones falling into a calm lake, ripples visible to the naked eye spread outwards, gradually wrapping the entire realm gate. Wherever the ripples passed, the realm gate suddenly became a little ethereal, as if covered by a layer of gauze, making it difficult to see clearly. Even though the Lotus Sisters were not proficient in the space principles, seeing this scene, they knew that Yang Kai should have made a breakthrough in sealing the realm gate. Perhaps they could witness this magical moment with their own eyes. Sure enough, as the ripples continued to fluctuate, the realm gate became more and more hazy, like a picture on a piece of paper that had become blurred after experiencing wind and frost. After a full 3 days, the void where the realm gate originally existed was empty. Whether it was observed with the naked eye or perceived with divine sense, there was no longer any trace of the realm gate. Yang Kai still maintained the same posture, the space principles fluctuating endlessly. The Lotus Sisters couldn't see any trace, but it didn't mean that he couldn't see it. The state of the realm gate in front of him could be said to be hidden. Without his guidance, no one could pass through this realm gate, but if he used a very strong force, it was possible to make the realm gate reappear. Since he had done it, he naturally had to do his best. Another half a day later, Yang Kai suddenly exhaled a long breath, slowly lowered his raised hand, and the space principles that had been fluctuating disappeared without a trace. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Yang Kai flew down directly, found a place to sit down cross-legged, threw a few spirit pills into his mouth, and meditated to adjust his breath. A few days of continuous use of the space principles was not a small burden for him, so he could take advantage of the recovery time to consolidate his gains. Seeing this, the Lotus Sisters hurriedly flew nearby, one on the left and one on the right. Although it was unlikely that there would be some blind guy coming to make trouble, they always had to be prepared. 2 hours later, Yang Kai slowly opened his eyes. The thoughtful look in his eyes gradually disappeared, and he nodded to the Lotus Sisters. Black Lotus said, "Is this considered a success?" Yang Kai raised his hand and said, "You can go and try." Black Lotus glanced at him and went to try. The result was pleasing. Just from the appearance, there was no trace of the previous existence of the realm gate. After shuttling back and forth, it also proved the fact that the realm gate was sealed. If this news was passed back, it would surely make the master a little happy. White Lotus asked, Has this realm gate been completely destroyed by you? Or is there a chance to recover? Yang Kai looked at her with some surprise. He did not expect this woman to be quite sharp. Even though she looked annoying. She actually thought of this level, at least his sister Black Lotus did not have this idea. Since it is a seal, it should be possible to recover in theory. But whether it is successful or not, I still have to try. In fact, even if she did not ask, Yang Kai was ready to restore the realm gate. Not to show off, but to confirm his own idea. If it could not be restored, he would have to ask Chang Tian if he wanted to seal the other realm gates. He did not want to make the realm gate disappear and not be able to find it back. It would not be good if he made Chang Tian unhappy. After all, this realm gate was different from the other realm gates that disappeared. He took the initiative to make it disappear. Without hesitation, Yang Kai flew to the place where he was before again, and like before, he stretched out a hand and covered the void. The space law fluctuated. As seen before, the ripples spread out again. The outline of the disappeared realm gate gradually appeared. In less than a quarter of an hour, the realm gate appeared in the vision of the three people again. Windchaser stared at it with a very surprised look, from time to time flying up and down around the realm gate, as if he wanted to see a flower from here. The first time, it took a few days to seal the realm gate, but the restoration only took a quarter of an hour. It was not that practice made perfect, but the restoration was much easier than the sealing, even easier than the restoration of the disappeared realm gates. I will report the news here to the master, White Lotus said, and then turned into a stream of light, flying towards the castle. Chapter 35-20. With the experience of the first seal, the rest was much simpler. In less than 10 days, Yang Kai had sealed 3 of the 4 world gates on the 100-spirit continent, leaving only 1 world gate as a passageway to enter and exit the 100-spirit continent. In this way, as long as this entrance and exit were guarded, no one could sneak into the 100-spirit continent to commit crimes. Yang Kai didn't know if a demon saint level master could break his seal with all his strength, but at least a half-saint wouldn't be able to. The Lotus Sisters had personally verified this point. Yang Kai estimated that even if his seal couldn't defend against the demon saint's attack, it should be able to hold on for a while. If he could shorten the time of the seal, he might be able to use this method to do something. So for a long time, Yang Kai stayed in front of one of the 100-spirit continents gate and kept sealing it, restoring it, sealing it, restoring it, repeating the process over and over again. The Lotus Sisters were a little speechless as they watched from the side, not knowing what he was doing. The task assigned by Master Chang Tian had been completed, and they could have gone home a long time ago. But this guy was here looking for trouble, causing them to have to stay by his side to guard him. Naturally, they were a little unhappy. Black Lotus went to ask Yang Kai, and the answer she got was to use this method to cultivate the space principles. Anyway, she didn't know how to cultivate the space principles, so whatever Yang Kai said was the truth. However, Yang Kai's progress was obvious. In the beginning, it took him 3 days to seal a world gate, but later, the time it took became shorter and shorter. After a few months, he didn't even need 10 breaths of time to seal a world gate, and he could make the sealed world gate reappear with a raise of his hand. This made the Lotus Sisters feel a little incredulous. In the entire demon territory, only the demon saint knew a thing or two about how world gates were formed, but for so many years, no one had ever been able to play with world gates like toys. On this day, while Yang Kai was working hard to master his method of sealing world gates, his heart suddenly moved. He stopped what he was doing and immersed his mind into the small sealed world. The voice of the embodiment immediately rang in his ears. "I'm going to break through." Yang Kai was stunned for a moment, and then he was overjoyed. After devouring the origin of the stone fire, the avatar went into a long period of slumber. When it woke up, it was almost at the peak of the Emperor realm. After such a long period of time, it had been cultivating non-stop with the help of the heaven-devouring Great Emperor. Naturally, its strength had increased tremendously. Previously, it had been devouring the million demons pill to accumulate the power to break through. It could be said that Yang Kai had been waiting for it to grow into a half-saint. He had found quite a number of myriad demon pills from those missing continents, and now that he had consumed about 70 to 80% of them, it was time for him to make a breakthrough. However, Yang Kai did not expect that the breakthrough this time would come a little late. In his estimation, the Dharmakaya should have broken through long ago. Let you out? Yang Kai asked. The world principles in the small sealed world were now complete, so there was no problem for the Emperor realm to break through inside. But since the embodiment contacted him like this, it was certain that it could not cross the final step in the small sealed world. Yang Kai thought that it needed to complete the breakthrough in the outside world. It's no use. I feel like I need to go back to the Cloud Shadow mainland. This answer puzzled Yang Kai a little. But when he thought about how the embodiment was now the master of the Cloud Shadow mainland, he understood. There must be something he did not know about. And if the embodiment wanted to break through the shackles, it would probably need to rely on some factors in the Cloud Shadow mainland. Thinking so, Yang Kai immediately said, "Wait." Saying so, he restored the sealed world gate, turned around, and stepped on Zhui Feng's back, and said to the Lien sisters, "I have something to discuss with Senior Chang Tian. I'll take my leave first." Clamping his legs together, Zhui Feng let out a hiss, and turned into a bolt of lightning. Behind him, the Lien sisters looked at each other, not knowing what he was doing, so they could only hurriedly chase after him. Since Chang Tian had entrusted Yang Kai's safety to them, they had to stay close to him. Galloping all the way, they returned to the castle in a short while. Jumping off the back of the horse, Yang Kai hurriedly walked inside. The giant beast called the lion suddenly appeared and blocked his way, looking down at Yang Kai condescendingly, and said in a booming voice, "Kid, what's the matter?" Perhaps it was because of his relationship with Chang Tian, but the lion's attitude towards Yang Kai was quite good. He didn't show the contempt he had when they first met. Yang Kai gave a fist salute and said, "I want to see Senior." The lion tilted its head and listened for a moment, then nodded gently and said, "Go in, the master is inside." As it spoke, it moved aside. It was still that dark, cold, and empty hall. Chang Tian sat cross-legged in the center of the hall. Dark demonic aura filled it like flowing clouds. When Yang Kai entered, the demonic aura returned to Chang Tian like a whale sucking in water, not leaving a single drop behind. Two bright rays of light lit up in the darkness, like two small suns. Without further ado, Yang Kai gave a fist salute and said, "Senior, I need to go back to the Cloud Shadow continent, and I'm here to say goodbye to you." Chang Tian nodded and said, "Go, be careful." "Why don't you ask me what I'm going to do?" Yang Kai was slightly startled by Chang Tian's straightforwardness, but this was exactly what he wanted to see. If Chang Tian did not let him go, he really did not know what to do. "Thank you, Senior." Yang Kai turned and left. After all, he was in the 100 Spirit continent, and if he wanted to go back to the Cloud Shadow continent, he would have to say goodbye to Chang Tian. Otherwise, he would not have wasted time to come back. "Let Wind-Chasing Wolf accompany you." Chang Tian's voice came from behind. "It's not convenient for Sister Lien to show her face outside, but Wind-Chasing Wolf is different. With him accompanying you, I don't think anyone will dare to do anything to you." Yang Kai paused, turned around and nodded slightly to Chang Tian, and sped up to leave the hall. When he went out, he met the lion again, and it looked surprised. "You're done?" How long had he been in there? It seemed to have only been a few breaths. Yang Kai smiled slightly. "Master is very easy to talk to." "Only you are easy to talk to." The lion stared at his back thoughtfully. Sister Lien chased him all the way back, and just happened to see Yang Kai turn around and ride on Wind-Chasing Wolf, and disappear in the blink of an eye. They were speechless. But very soon, Chang Tian's divine sense transmission entered their ears. After learning the whole story, the two sisters heaved a sigh of relief. They had been accompanying Yang Kai for the past few months, and had nothing to do, so they were really bored. Above the void, Wind-Chasing Wolf was excited, especially after passing through the realm gate of the 100 Spirit continent, and entering another continent. This change was particularly obvious, and it felt like a fish in the vast sea, and a bird in the sky. Although the 100 Spirit continent was large, it was still a cage for Wind-Chasing Wolf. Only the entire demon territory was suitable for him to gallop. The earth flew under his feet, and the wind blowing in his face forced Yang Kai to use his emperor chi to resist, but wind-chasing wolf was happy to endure it, and his speed was getting faster and faster. Under the guidance of Yang Kai, they passed through one realm gate after another, crossing one continent after another. In less than half a day, the man and his mount had returned from the 100-spirit continent to Cloud Shadow continent. It was a terrifyingly short time. As soon as they returned to Cloud Shadow continent, Yang Kai got off his mount, patted wind-chasing wolf's neck, and then stretched out his hand to open a gap in the sealed world bead. In the next moment, the huge figure of the embodiment appeared from the void, startling wind-chasing wolf. He jumped away immediately and stared at the embodiment with great vigilance. Yang Kai did not have time to comfort him, because the embodiment's aura was fluctuating at the moment, and it was indeed on the verge of a breakthrough, but because it was in the small sealed world bead, it could not resonate with the Cloud Shadow continent, so it had not been able to cross that barrier. After it appeared from the small sealed world bead, the fluctuating aura became more and more obvious. High in the sky, the embodiment fell quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it became a small black dot. However, the moment it landed on the ground, it silently melted into the ground and disappeared without a trace. Wind-chasing wolf was surprised when he saw this, and he immediately chased after it. At the place where the embodiment disappeared, he dug a big hole in the ground with his 4 hooves. Yang Kai stood in midair with a solemn expression, staring at a certain place on the ground. Although he could not see the embodiment, he could perceive its location. In this world, no matter if it was a human, a monster, or a demon, any breakthrough to a great realm was a test of life and death. Yang Kai did not know whether the breakthrough of a half-saint counted as a breakthrough to a great realm, nor did he know whether the embodiment would encounter any danger, but right now, there was nothing he could do to help. The embodiment could only rely on itself. Fortunately, although the embodiment cultivated the heaven-devouring Great Emperor's battle techniques, it was able to avoid the aftereffects of the heaven-devouring Great Emperor's battle techniques, to a great extent, because it was born as a stone mongoose. Otherwise, just devouring so much energy would be enough to make it suffer unimaginable hardships during the breakthrough. From this point alone, the heaven-devouring Great Emperor, who cultivated the heaven-devouring Great Emperor's battle techniques to the level of the strongest great emperors in history, was indeed a hero among men. Yang Kai could not figure out how the embodiment resolved the various discomforts caused by cultivating the heaven-devouring Great Emperor's battle techniques. Yang Kai thought that the breakthrough of the embodiment this time would definitely cause a natural phenomenon, and it might even cause a great deal of destruction. After all, it was closely related to the Cloud Shadow mainland. But what he did not expect was that after the embodiment sank into the ground, it did not move anymore. Not to mention any natural phenomenon, there was not even the slightest sound. It was as if the embodiment had sunk into the ground and fallen into a deep sleep. He tried to perceive with his heart, but he could not find much information. The inseparable connection between him and the embodiment had also become blurred, as if it had entered a different world. A hissing sound was heard, waking Yang Kai from his worry. He turned his head and saw wind-chasing wolf, who was covered in mud, screaming beside him. This guy had been looking for the embodiment for a long time, but he still could not find it. Instead, he made a big hole in the ground. It seemed that he was here to complain to Yang Kai. Yang Kai did not have time to pay attention to him, so he directly pushed his head aside. Chapter 35:21. Time passed, and the embodiment had already sunk into the ground for several hours, but there was still no movement. This made Yang Kai frown, secretly worried. The state of the embodiment was clearly a sign that it was about to break through, but why was there no sound until now? The vagueness of his perception did not allow him to accurately detect the current situation of the embodiment, which made him a little anxious. Suddenly, heaven and earth trembled, and a layer of faintly discernible vibration waves appeared in the void, bursting out in all directions. Yang Kai's expression turned serious, and he looked around, keenly aware that there seemed to be a subtle change in the energy between heaven and earth. If the whole world was in a state of stillness just now, then this stillness slowly began to flow, as if there was an invisible hand slowly stirring up the wind and clouds. Thump, a dull and heavy sound came from the depths of the earth, like the sound of a strong heartbeat, and also like someone beating the war drum of a charge from tens of thousands of feet below. As the sound came out, the flow of energy suddenly accelerated, and the world suddenly changed. The whistling sound of the wind filled the ears, and the tide of energy gathering from all directions to a certain place below the ground. Thump, thump, thump. One after another dull sounds came out. This strange sound, like the sound of a heartbeat, gave the illusion that the whole world was about to come to life. Even the long dragon-like mountain range in the distance was undulating, as if the earth was breathing. The energy of heaven and earth gathered more and more, and it became denser and denser, and it all poured into the ground and disappeared. Underground, there seemed to be a black hole that could devour everything. No matter how much energy poured in, it would be devoured cleanly. In the fierce wind, the chasing wind hissed, irritable and restless. Yang Kai was as still as a mountain, his gaze piercing through the void and penetrating the earth. In the depths of the earth, a vigorous aura was slowly growing stronger, like a dragon that had awakened from a deep slumber. Such an astonishing phenomenon of heaven and earth naturally alarmed the nearby demon race, who rushed over to investigate the situation. But they were all blocked by an invisible force, unable to come within 1,000 miles. The embodiment was the master of the Cloud Shadow mainland, and it was not difficult for him to do this with this identity. The embodiment's aura was getting stronger and stronger. Even if Yang Kai didn't pay special attention to it, he could still clearly sense it. At a certain point, the embodiment's aura suddenly stopped growing. It seemed to have reached a certain limit. Not only did it not grow stronger, but it even decreased. When Yang Kai, who had been paying attention to the embodiment's movements, saw this, his face darkened. He knew that the embodiment must have run into trouble. Breaking through to the half-saint realm wasn't a simple matter. The demon territory had the myriad demon pill, but there weren't many half-saint realm experts. This wasn't because the accumulation of power was disadvantageous, but because of the shackles of one's own comprehension. If one couldn't break through this level, he would never be able to reach a higher level. Fortunately, it didn't take long for the falling aura to strengthen once again and climb to its peak. However, the situation this time was almost exactly the same as before. When the aura reached its peak, it couldn't go any further and quickly fell back down. Yang Kai's face darkened. As the saying goes, the first drum builds up the spirit, the second weakens it, and the third exhausts it. The accumulation of power could penetrate a stone with dripping water, and sand could build a tower. However, if the breakthrough was delayed for too long, the chances of success would become smaller. Moreover, the embodiment's breakthrough this time was a little strange. He didn't see the familiar world energy baptism. He didn't know if this was because he was in the demon territory and the star boundaries world principles were different, or if there were other reasons. However, what was certain was that the embodiment was indeed in a state of breakthrough. This inevitably made Yang Kai a little worried. He had been in the second-order Emperor realm for a long time now. Who knew when he would break through to the third-order Emperor realm? What if the world principles of the two worlds were different, causing problems during the breakthrough? What if there was no world energy baptism at that time? It was indeed too early to worry about this. Perhaps the embodiment's breakthrough would give him some inspiration. Over the next few days, the embodiment remained in the same state as before. The aura coming from the ground continued to cycle between getting stronger and weaker. Yang Kai really couldn't figure out what was going on. Logically speaking, if the embodiment hadn't completed the breakthrough for such a long time, it should have failed. The price of failure was either a drop in cultivation or death. There was no other possibility. However, in Yang Kai's perception, not only was there no problem with the embodiment, it even gave him a feeling that it had merged with the entire Cloud Shadow mainland and was in a deep sleep. The strength of the aura was the same as the rhythm of its breathing. Such a long period of abnormality naturally alarmed many demon kings in Cloud Shadow. Yin, Lao Ku, Kusun, and the others came to investigate the situation, but they were all blocked 1,000 miles away. Fortunately, Yang Kai noticed their arrival and took the initiative to contact them, which made them feel a lot more at ease. After all, they were very worried about the sudden abnormality in Cloud Shadow and didn't know what was going on. Now that they confirmed that it was Yang Kai's doing, they immediately felt relieved. Compared to this, they were more surprised that Yang Kai suddenly returned safely. Previously, when the Holy Spirit of the 100 Spirit Continent appeared and kidnapped him, no one knew what would happen to Yang Kai in the end. Then several months had passed without any news. They could only confirm that Yang Kai was not dead by seeing that Tukuro and the others were safe and sound. The 3 demon kings of the 100 Spirit Continent had been planted with the Divine Soul brand by Yang Kai. If something happened to Yang Kai, the 3 of them would definitely be buried with him. There was no possibility of survival. Since there was nothing to do, Yang Kai simply went to meet them 1,000 miles away. After asking around, he learned that nothing special happened in Cloud Shadow recently. However, because he was kidnapped, many people were a little worried, especially Li Shiqing. She kept persuading Yin and the others to gather the power of Cloud Shadow and go to the 100 Spirit Continent to rescue him. Naturally, Yin and the others couldn't agree. As members of the demon race, they knew the terrifying power of the 100 Spirit Continent. It was not something that Cloud Shadow Continent could contend with. They could easily send a half-saint to destroy Cloud Shadow. This was not a matter of loyalty, but an instinctive choice. After persuading Yin and the others, Li Shiqing even planned to go to the Phantom Continent to find Yu Rumeng. Fortunately, she was stopped by Boya. Yang Kai was a little surprised. After all, he didn't treat her well. When they first met, he even slapped her. However, when he thought about how he and she were the only 2 humans in the entire demon territory, he felt that they were in the same boat. It wasn't hard to understand why Li Shiqing would do this. If something happened to him, she would be isolated and helpless in the demon territory. No matter how bad his attitude was to her, they were still of the same race. While Yin and the others were talking, Wind-Chasing Wolf flew up and down, causing many members of the demon race to look at it. However, the group of demon race members didn't recognize Wind-Chasing Wolf. They only thought that this mount looked extraordinary. Their king actually kidnapped a mount from the 100 Spirit Continent? This made Yin and the others a little surprised. It seemed that their king didn't encounter any harsh treatment in the 100 Spirit Continent. The sun rose and the moon disappeared. Time passed. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. Although he had never seen how other half-saint broke through, he was sure that no one would spend so much time to break through. Yang Kai reckoned that Dharmakaya was the first to break through. There was no change every day. Every day was the same as before. It gave people the illusion that the world was repeating itself. One day after 2 months, when the Dharmakaya's aura reached its peak, it didn't fall back down like before. Instead, it continued to rise. Yang Kai didn't notice it at first. After all, he had been paying attention to it for 2 months without any change. Who would have thought that there would be a change at this time? It wasn't until the Dharmakaya's aura broke through its previous limit and reached a new peak that he suddenly woke up with a look of excitement. Yin and the others obviously noticed this change. They all looked at him. The Dharmakaya's aura didn't fall back down. Instead, it continued to rise. It kept rising, rising, and rising. Finally, at a certain moment, there seemed to be a sound of something breaking. The rising aura reached its peak. The energy of heaven and earth gathered underground like a tsunami and was immediately swallowed up. Half-step sage, Lao Ku exclaimed in excitement. After waiting and observing for nearly 2 months, even if Yang Kai didn't explain, they knew that someone was breaking through a big realm. Moreover, the person breaking through was definitely related to Yang Kai. Now this brand new aura undoubtedly meant that the person had succeeded in breaking through. In other words, Cloud Shadow Mainland had its own half-saint from now on. They no longer had to act according to others' wishes. If Cloud Shadow didn't have its own half-saint, how could it have been oppressed and enslaved by Yu Sang? But, who was this person? When did he refine Cloud Shadow's origin? Noticing the curious gazes around him, Yang Kai didn't intend to explain. Currently, only Yu Rumeng knew about the existence of Dharmakaya in the territory of demons. Now that he had broken through to half-saint, he could use it as a trump card. Naturally, it was better to hide it for as long as possible. He still remembered that Yusang was eyeing him covetously. Although he was now sent to the two-realm battlefield, who knew if he would come back? But now that he had Dharmakaya, he didn't need to fear him anymore. The aura of the newly advanced half-saint gradually disappeared. Clark and the others showed a trace of disappointment. Originally, they wanted to pay him a visit, but looking at the situation, he didn't plan to show himself. So they could only leave it at that. Fortunately, they could confirm that this newly advanced half-saint had a good relationship with their king. They might have a chance to meet him in the future. After instructing Clark and the others to wait, Yang Kai flew 1,000 miles away and found Dharmakaya that had drilled out of the ground. They looked at each other. Yang Kai showed a surprised expression because Dharmakaya seemed to have become smaller. Although Dharmakaya could freely change its size, it usually maintained a comfortable state. Previously, because it had refined stone fire's origin, its size had increased by 3 feet. But now it was only as tall as a person. Chapter 35:22. Although his body had become smaller, it did not mean that his power had weakened. Instead, it was a symbol of condensing. The originally obvious features of the Holy Spirit had also changed. The stone spikes that grew on the surface of his body had also disappeared. The lumps of stone were like towering muscles, full of explosive power. The evil fire was faintly discernible in the cracks of the stone body, and the demonic aura that wrapped around his body was so dense that it soared into the sky. Perhaps because it had just been promoted, the embodiment was still unable to freely control its own power. Yang Kai could clearly feel the aura of a half-saint from his body, which was a kind of power that surpassed that of the Demon King and the Emperor realm. Without making a comparison, he did not know whether there was any gap between the embodiment and those veteran half-saint masters. With a surge of divine sense, Yang Kai took the embodiment back into the sealed world bead and let it consolidate its cultivation. After that, he returned to join Yin and the others. Not in a hurry, Yang Kai rode on Wind Chaser and led a group of demon race members towards Cloud Shadow City. It was almost a year away from the agreed date with Mingyu. Now that the dust had settled on the embodiment, it was time to go to the Phantom Continent and look for Yu Ru Meng. If something happened to Mingyu, Yu Ru Meng would definitely be the first to know. If he stayed by her side, he would be able to know the movements of the Eternal Heaven Continent at any time and make plans in advance. Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly saw a group of demon race members rushing over from the distance. They had hurried expressions, but when they saw Yang Kai at the front, they were slightly startled. They immediately cupped their fists and said, "Greetings, great king, master." Yang Kai nodded slightly and looked at them condescendingly. "What's the matter?" The demon race was just a demon commander. It seemed like he had flown over from Cloud Shadow City. He cupped his hands and replied, "Reporting to your majesty, according to the report of our spies, all the continents in the demon territory are urgently mobilizing their troops. Even the half-saint master has been mobilized. It seems like a storm is brewing, but we don't know what it is for." Previously, in order to search for Mingyu's whereabouts, Yang Kai had dispatched a lot of people from Cloud Shadow and Basket Plains to various continents within the demon territory to scout for information. Although they had found Mingyu, these spies had never returned. Instead, they had been constantly sending information from various places within the demon territory back to Cloud Shadow City. Recently, they had discovered some abnormalities in the other continents, as if something big was about to happen. Naturally, they would report it immediately. Lao Ka frowned and asked, "Did something happen in the two-realm battlefield?" All the continents were mobilizing their troops. Many half-saint realm experts were mobilized. This was obviously a big deal. Apart from the changes in the two-realm battlefield, there shouldn't be any other reason for the demon territory to make such a big move. The demon commander shook his head and said, "I don't know but what? But everyone, the target of the half-saint master seems to be the Eternal Heaven Continent, and not the two-realm battlefield." The Eternal Heaven Continent. Yang Kai's expression changed. He lowered his body slightly, and stared at the demon commander in front of him. "Are you sure it's the Eternal Heaven Continent?" The demon commander felt a little weak under Yang Kai's stare. He swallowed his saliva and said, "That's what the spies reported. It said that there are already millions of troops stationed outside the Eternal Heaven Continent. That meant that something had happened in the Eternal Heaven Continent." "Hurry up and gather people," Carson hesitated and said. "But my king, I didn't receive any orders to." "Are you saying that this king's words are not orders?" Yang Kai looked at him coldly, causing Carson to immediately swallow the rest of his words. After a while, the members of the demon race scattered and passed down the order. Although Yang Kai was impatient and couldn't wait to fly to the Eternal Heaven Continent to see Ming Yu's situation, he could only wait patiently. The battle between the great emperors and the demon saint couldn't be decided in a short time. Even if he went there early, it would be useless. With his current strength, he couldn't intervene in a battle of this level. If Ming Yu wanted to escape, she had to rely on herself. Moreover, he didn't know how Ming Yu would contact him. Under the watchful eyes of so many demon saint, nothing could escape their observation. In a short time, the two continents of Cloud Shadow and the Blue Plain were in turmoil. Many members of the demon race were mobilized and gathered at the designated realm gates. 3 days later, the million troops of Cloud Shadow gathered. This was because there wasn't enough time. If there was more time, it would be more than enough to gather several times more people. After all, the population of a continent was still very large. The million troops majestically passed through the realm gates, forming a long line that stretched as far as the eye could see. When they stepped into the territory of the Blue Plain continent and arrived at another realm gate, Tukuro, Baza, and the others had already gathered their million troops and were quietly waiting. When the two sides met, Yang Kai's army was more than 2 million troops. When he was defending Roaring Tiger City, Yang Kai only had a few 100,000 troops. The difference was several times greater. When the number of troops increased, the troops became somewhat messy. Fortunately, many Demon King were obedient, so it wasn't too troublesome to unify them. The speed of an army naturally couldn't compare to that of a single person. Yang Kai estimated that it would take at least half a month for him to arrive at the Eternal Heaven Continent with these 2 million troops. "I hope nothing bad happened to Ming Yu." After passing through one realm gate after another, the army continued to approach the Eternal Heaven Continent. Yang Kai's mood became calmer and calmer day by day. He no longer had the initial impatience and uneasiness. He had already made up his mind that if the time came, he would use Zhui Feng's speed to escape with Ming Yu. As for whether or not they could escape, he could only leave it to fate. Furthermore, he was not sure if Zhui Feng would cooperate with him. Although this fellow was very close to him, it still had its own intellect, so it might not be willing to leave the dark domain with him. On the Eternal Heaven Continent, the blood sea was surging. 12 blood-colored pillars were like nails nailed to the ground by the gods, turning the vast territory into an impenetrable prison. Outside the Blood Sea prison, many blood demons were rolling with their devil energy, urging the power of the Blood Sea. In addition, countless demon race were stationed outside the prison, ready to guard against any accidents. Among them, there were more than a dozen half-saint realm experts. However, the situation here was a little different from the last time Yang Kai had come here. The biggest difference was that the demon race that had continuously thrown themselves into the Blood Sea had all disappeared. All the living beings on the Eternal Heaven Continent had been sacrificed, and the Blood Sea's power had been pushed to the extreme. The entire Blood Sea seemed to be boiling, rolling and churning, and constantly emitting huge bubbles. Inside the Blood Sea, countless ghosts were shuttling back and forth, emitting waves of ghostly wails and howls that shook one's soul. Chapter 35-23. He had clearly severely injured him, and sacrificed all the living beings of the Eternal Heaven Continent to exhaust his remaining strength. After such a long time, he should have become weaker and weaker until he died without any power to fight back. Then, he should have been digested by the laws of heaven and earth in the demon territory. So why was he still able to resist? Furthermore, judging from the traces of Ming Yu's attack, this guy's aura was even more stable and powerful than when he was first trapped here. It felt like he had recovered to his peak state. What was going on? Where did he go wrong? Xueli's expression was cold. He couldn't understand. The injuries on Mingyu's body were obvious to all. Before he was trapped here, he was injured by several demon saints working together. The wound on his abdomen was caused by Xueli himself. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to use a secret technique that hurt himself as well as the enemy. Xueli believed that no one in the world could heal such an injury other than himself. As one of the great emperors of the Star Realm, Mingyu definitely didn't lack healing pills. But how could his secret technique be blocked by mere pills? Xueli wanted nothing more than to dive into the depths of the Blood Sea and see Mingyu's current state with his own eyes. However, the Blood Sea that was originally under his control had a circle of pure land filled with gentle light that blocked the power of the Great Formation. Xueli couldn't see the situation inside at all. Since he couldn't see, then he could only test it out. He had personally guarded this place, but had still allowed the Blood Demon clan to be slaughtered like vegetables. If news of this were to spread, it would be a joke. With a low shout, Xueli raised his hands. His tall body shook, and a vast amount of devil energy wildly surged out. The boiling Blood Sea had a trace of strange silence at this moment, as if an invisible hand had pressed down all of its movements. In the next instant, the Blood Sea suddenly started to spin clockwise, rolling up a tremendous force. In the blink of an eye, a giant blood ball appeared in the middle of the 12 blood-colored pillars. The blood ball was completely red. Even from thousands of kilometers away, it could be seen clearly. It was as if the full moon in the sky had been dyed red and had fallen to the ground. It brought an indescribable horror, as if the world was about to meet its end. At the center of the blood ball, a faint white light was refracted. This was the only pure land that Bright Moon had formed by pushing aside the sea of blood with her supreme cultivation. However, this pure land was almost imperceptible compared to the entire blood ball. Within the sea of blood, blood shadows the size of a palm took shape. If one looked closely, they would discover that these blood shadows were blood-colored bats. Under Xueli's control, they covered the sky and covered the earth as they charged towards the pure white land. However, the moment they came into contact with the gentle light, they all turned into dust and disappeared. The number of blood-colored bats was enormous, and they were constantly being born and disappearing. However, no matter how many blood-colored bats there were, they were unable to weaken the light of the pure land. He originally thought that with the 12 great devilish formation and the sea of blood gathered by all living beings in the eternal heaven continent, it would be enough to eliminate Mingyu. Who would have thought that Mingyu still had the strength to struggle? Since his original plan was no longer feasible, he could only make some adjustments. Once he thought of this, a hint of determination flashed through Xueli's scarlet eyes. He formed a seal with both hands, and as the demonic energy on his body surged, the blood ball spun even faster. The indescribable speed created a tornado. Looking down from the sky, the world below seemed to have turned into a spinning top that was about to spin the entire eternal heaven continent. The blood devils around the great formation all retreated, afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire. Under Xueli's control, all kinds of blood creatures were born in the Blood Sea. They rushed toward the pure land, and then disappeared when they came into contact with the pure white light. The Blood Sea had an extremely strong corrosive power, while the gentle light had an unparalleled purifying power. This was a battle between corrosion and purification. Mingyu and Xueli were like natural enemies as they clashed with their great Daos, causing the entire world to lose its color. As time passed, the blood ball gradually shrank in size. However, the pure land didn't move at all. It didn't shrink in the slightest. Many half-saint and demon race watched from afar and felt their hearts ache. That ball of blood had been obtained through the blood sacrifice of all the living beings in the eternal heaven continent. In other words, Xueli was currently using the power of all the living beings in the eternal heaven continent to fight against Mingyu. Every time it shrank, it represented the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands, or even millions of devils. Moreover, it was unknown whether this sacrifice was meaningful. On the other hand, Xueli's expression didn't change after he made his move. The shrinking of the blood ball didn't affect him in the slightest. To him, if he could weaken Mingyu again, it would be worth it even if he sacrificed 2 or 3 more living beings in the continents, let alone making the blood ball disappear completely. There were hundreds of continents in the demon territory, but there were only 12 demon saint. If he could exchange 2 or 3 continents worth of living beings for 1 demon saint spot, it would be a very good deal. Moreover, the blood sacrifices were only the living beings in those continents, not the continents themselves. This kind of low-level demon race was nothing to the demon saint. The demon territory didn't have much, but it had a large population. When the time came, they just had to migrate some demon race members from other continents, and they would naturally be able to restore the vitality of the continents that had been sacrificed. The sizzling sound didn't stop, and it even covered the movement caused by the blood ball's rotation. That was the sound of Mingyu's light purifying the blood water. Inside the dark red blood ball, the originally weak light grew stronger and stronger. It seemed that as the blood ball's volume decreased, the Pure Land's range gradually expanded as well. A trace of surprise finally flashed through Xue Li's scarlet eyes. If he was certain that Mingyu's injuries had healed at the beginning, then he was certain now that Mingyu had definitely recovered to her peak condition, or she had used some kind of secret technique to forcefully stabilize her injuries. Otherwise, it was impossible for her to be so powerful. He couldn't delay any longer. From the looks of it, the situation would only worsen if he delayed any longer. If Mingyu really managed to escape, then as the person in charge of guarding this place, he would definitely lose all face. Xue Li suddenly lifted his foot and stomped on the blood-colored pillar beneath his feet. An invisible force spread along the blood-colored pillar, and instantly spread to the other 11 blood-colored pillars. The long pillars that had been acting as the foundation of the formation, all this time suddenly flashed with a strange light. The complicated patterns on the pillars gradually flowed. 11 streams of blood separated from the blood ball, and were absorbed by the blood-colored pillars. The blood flowed along the pillars all the way to the top, condensing into blood-colored figures. 11 blood-colored pillars, 11 blood-colored figures. Coincidentally, there was a blood-colored figure standing on each blood-colored pillar. They resonated with Xue Li from afar, and formed the strongest formation in the entire demon territory. The 12 Great Devilish Formation. There were tall and short figures, male and female, and their bodies were constructed from blood. Their facial features were clear, and their eyes were bright and spirited. Different auras were exuded from their bodies, but each and every one of them was the aura of a demon saint. These 12 figures represented the 12 strongest existences within the demon territory. However, other than Xue Li's true body, the other 11 were all avatars that had descended as the foundation of the 12 Great Devilish Formation. A wisp of each demon saint's soul was sealed. At a critical moment, the person in charge of the formation could naturally use a secret technique to awaken these avatars and increase the power of the formation. For example, at this moment, among them, Yu Meng and Bai Liemo were among them. However, other than the 2 of them, 90% of the other 10 demon saint were male. Xue Li, what's the situation now? One of the tall figures glanced around, then turned to look at Xue Li and asked, "Can't you see what's going on? Mingyu clearly tricked all of us." "Damn it!" Another hoarse voice rang out, mixed with anger. Even though it was only avatars that had descended, the demon saint weren't idiots. The situation was clear at a glance. Mingyu had the ability to resist the blood ball. Clearly, she wasn't in a dying state like they had expected. She was looking for a chance to escape. "Xue Li, you were too careless. You can't even keep an eye on a half-dead guy. You're practically trash." A short figure cackled strangely. This person was extremely conspicuous among the 12 demon saint, because he was extremely short. He was only about the size of a 5 or 6-year-old child. However, his body was rolling and looked rather comical. However, his aura was the most dangerous out of all the demon saint. He was like a volcano that could erupt at any time. Once this was said, many of the demon saint frowned. It was undeniable that Xue Li was responsible for this situation. If he had noticed Mingyu's condition earlier, he might have been able to avoid the current situation. However, if they thought about it carefully, This probably had nothing to do with Xueli. If the great emperors of the Star Realm were so easy to deal with, they wouldn't have spent so much effort to set up this trap. If it were anyone else guarding this place, they might not have done as well as Xueli. After all, Xueli was a blood demon. The power of the blood sacrifice of the living beings of the continent could only be maximized in his hands. However, with something like this happening, someone had to be the scapegoat. As soon as the short man finished speaking, Xueli turned his head and looked at him. He grinned and said, "Huobo, who gave you the guts to speak to me like this? Could it be that you've forgotten the pain of being beaten 20,000 years ago? Do you want to try again? If you want, I don't mind teaching you a lesson." The demon saint called Huobo jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. His rolling body actually swelled up, and his already dangerous aura became much more dangerous. "You still dare to mention something from 20,000 years ago? If you hadn't cheated back then, how could I have been humiliated by you?" Xueli sneered. "It was you who was childish and stupid. How can you blame it on me? Although a brain is a good thing, not everyone has it. Then you planned to destroy all of them in one fell swoop. Even someone as strong as a demon saint wouldn't feel good about having a soul fragment destroyed. At the very least, they would need to recover for a while before they could recover. This period of recovery was the best opportunity for Mingyu to escape. At that time, the only one who could stop him with all their might would be Xueli. The other demon saints' hands and feet would definitely be tied, due to the damage to their souls. Although they stood on opposing sides, Xueli couldn't help but praise Mingyu at this moment. The other demon saints' true bodies were already on the way. They would probably gather at the Eternal Heaven continent in a few days. If he didn't do this, Mingyu wouldn't be able to leave the territory of the demon saint even if he had the ability to reach the heavens. But now that he had done this, even if the other demon saints rushed over, they might not necessarily be able to stop him. Within the dark red ball of blood, a dot of light suddenly lit up like a lantern in the night. In a short period of time, the light crazily increased, as if there was a sun sealed within the ball of blood. It flickered with an unusual white heat. As the light increased, a terrifying power bloomed from within the ball of blood. Other than Xueli, the faces of the other 11 demon saints' soul fragments were filled with astonishment and anger. The dazzling white heat broke through the seal of the ball of blood and spread outwards with a bang. Wherever the white light passed, the blood vaporized without a trace. The enormous ball of blood actually only lasted for a short 3 breaths before disappearing. Contained within the pure white light was a world-destroying killing intent that swept towards the demon saint's location without slowing down in the slightest. The speed of the light was so fast that even the demon saint's soul fragments couldn't detect it before it was already right in front of them. The first soul fragment that was enveloped by the pure white light only had time to let out a scream before it collapsed with a bang and disappeared without a trace. At the same time, on a certain continent, a figure that was speeding through the Eternal Heaven continent let out a muffled groan and fell straight down. Fortunately, a half-saint who was traveling with him had quick reflexes and used his devil essence to wrap him up. Otherwise, he would have definitely become a joke. Immediately after, a second scream, a third scream. Wishful thinking. Xueli roared. In this short period of time, he had already come up with a countermeasure. As he spoke, he bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood mist to the left. The blood mist was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of the nearest blood-colored pillar and enveloped the soul fragment on the blood-colored pillar. Immediately after, the white light attacked, but it was offset by the blood mist that enveloped the soul fragment, leaving the soul fragment unharmed. The white light gradually faded, and the terrifying power slowly subsided. The figure of a young man slowly appeared where the huge blood ball had originally been. His face was like jade, and he was extraordinarily handsome. His pure white clothes were spotless as he walked out of the void, and quietly looked at Xueli with an indifferent smile on his face. Xueli's gaze paused on Mingyu's abdomen for a moment before abruptly shrinking. The wound was no longer there. Mingyu had indeed recovered. Then, Xueli turned his head to the side and saw Huobo, who had a look of relief on his face. His face couldn't help but twitch. When Mingyu attacked just now, he was the only one present who could resist a bit. The other demon saint soul fragments couldn't resist at all. At the critical moment, he could only think of a way to save one soul fragment. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to stop Mingyu from escaping by himself. At that time, he didn't think of anything, but now he realized that the one he saved was actually Huobu. Looking at this guy's dumbfounded expression, Xueli had the urge to vomit blood. But now was clearly not the time to care about this. The blood sacrifice technique had been broken, and the 12 Citadel Great Demonic Formation had become a joke due to a moment of carelessness. Now the only ones who could stop Mingyu were him and Huobu. Come quickly! Xueli roared at Huobu and turned his head, placing all of his attention on Mingyu, who was walking over step by step. Although he wasn't afraid of the great emperors at their peak, he wouldn't be able to stop them for long if they wanted to escape. Back then, in the demon territory, they had to rely on the combined efforts of several half-saint to injure Mingyu and trap her here. If Huobu came too late, then everything would be over. Huobu obviously understood this as well. He turned his head and glared hatefully at Mingyu. Then, with a sway of his body, he turned into a puddle of blood and disappeared into the blood-colored pillar. His main body, on the other hand, was rushing towards the eternal heaven continent with all his might. Chapter 35-25. The mountains and rivers trembled, the void shattered, and the continent was smashed into pieces. Enormous cracks stretched across the void, as if they were scars that could never be healed. The bloody light and the moonlight clashed in the void. The half-saint and the demon race below were dazed as they watched. They couldn't see the situation of the battle clearly. The aura of the great Tao from the intense collision covered all traces. There were only flashes of light in their field of vision. Rumbling sounds continuously rang in their ears. The yuan qi of heaven and earth shook unceasingly. The aftermath of the collision was like a ripple that crazily spread across the entire continent. Even someone as strong as a half-saint still felt insignificant in front of such aftermath. This was the battle between the great emperors and the demon saint. The Eternal Sky continent was already somewhat fragmented due to the previous battle. After experiencing this, it could be said that the continent was basically destroyed. Even with the laws of heaven and earth of the great world within the demon territory, it wasn't very possible for it to repair itself. It could be imagined that in the next 10,000 years, it would be like the other continents that had disappeared. It would slowly break away from the demon territory and completely disappear into the endless void. Although they couldn't see the exact situation of the battle, with the eyesight and knowledge of the half-saint, they could still see that the great emperors from the star realm were trying to escape. However, with the demon saint obstructing him, he couldn't escape for a while. This was a very normal phenomenon. Two people with the same strength would always be entangled while escaping. However, the former would undoubtedly have the upper hand, and the one obstructing him would inevitably have to pay a higher price to achieve his goal. Above the void behind Mingyu, a full moon bloomed with bright light. The gentle halo illuminated the world. The aura of the great Tao fluctuated around him, and he had the power to destroy the world with just a raise of his hand. Sometimes, Xueli condensed into a human form and displayed the power of various secret techniques. Sometimes, he turned into a bloody mist, and his whereabouts were uncertain. He didn't need to fight to the death with Mingyu. He only needed to delay his opponent and wait for Huobu to arrive. When the time came, they would naturally have the advantage in a 2 versus 1 battle. Mingyu clearly understood this point. His attacks became fiercer and fiercer, as if he wanted to fight with his life on the line. What he truly cared about was not Xueli, who was pestering him, but the throbbing in his heart. It was as if there was a pair of eyes quietly watching him from the dark, ready to deal a fatal blow to him at any time. If it weren't for this, Mingyu would have fought Xueli to the death long ago. He had tried many times to lure out the enemy hiding in the dark, but he had never succeeded. He did not know whether it was his own illusion, or the enemy was too good at hiding. The longer she delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for her. Mingyu could not delay any longer. She had to escape as soon as possible to have a chance of survival. Once he thought of this, A trace of determination flashed through his eyes. His hands formed a seal, and the full moon behind him abruptly shone with a dazzling light. His body turned into a ray of white light, and charged towards Xueli with an aura of survival, even in the face of death. The bloody mist in front of him condensed, revealing Xueli's figure. A hint of hesitation and struggle flashed through his eyes. In the end, he gritted his teeth, and the blood in his body surged. A dark red light illuminated the sky as he charged towards the bright moon without hesitation. "Since you want to fight with your life, then I'll do as you wish." Xueli instinctively felt that this was just Mingyu's trick, trying to use this method to force him to retreat. After all, this was demon territory. If he was injured again, he would not be able to escape. Therefore, he could not retreat at a time like this. If he retreated, then Mingyu's scheme would succeed. If he could not retreat, then he could only fight. However, Xueli's expression quickly became astonished. This was because as the two drew closer, he realized that Mingyu had no intention of stopping. Instead, his aura became even stronger, and his momentum became even more determined. This bastard really wanted to fight to the death with him. Instead of being shocked, Xueli was overjoyed. He could not help but laugh loudly. "Mingyu, you are seeking your own death." When he finished speaking, he also increased his own aura. In the sky, the two rays of white and red light quickly approached each other and collided in the blink of an eye. There was no rumbling sound. In this instant, the entire world fell into a strange silence, as if it was the chaos of the beginning of the world. However, all of the demon race who were watching this scene could clearly hear their hearts thumping in their chests. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed them, causing them to feel stifled and suffocated. The two rays of light, red and white, were in a stalemate in the sky for an instant. Then they suddenly exploded and swallowed the entire world. All of the demon race could not help but narrow their eyes at this moment. Shockwaves visible to the naked eye spread out in all directions from the point of collision. Wild winds howled as they swept past, flattening shattered mountains and rivers. The two figures were blasted away at a speed faster than their momentum. Xueli's angry roar resounded throughout the entire continent. "Mingyu, you can't escape." At an unknown distance, a figure floated up shakily. It was the great emperor's Mingyu, who had fought with Xueli until both sides were injured. At this moment his face was pale, his hair was disheveled, and his pure white robes were stained with blood. No one knew whether it was his or Xueli's. He ignored Xueli's words and activated his emperor's vitality to fly towards the nearest realm gate. At the same time, he reached out and pinched a green leaf, put it in his mouth, and held it under his tongue. If it were not for the leaf of the immortal tree, he would not have dared to use such a method to escape from Xueli's entanglement. It was because of this that he was so decisive. Back then, Yang Kai had given him 3 leaves from the immortal tree. He had used 2 of them to heal his injuries. He was not willing to use the last one just in case. Now it seemed that this decision was wise. With this leaf of the immortal tree, he could stabilize his injuries and take advantage of the fact that the other demon saint had not yet arrived. At such a close distance, Mingyu could clearly see the other party's ugly face and bloated body. The other party's eyes were almost popping out of their sockets, as if there was a great pressure on his body that he couldn't bear. The originally dangerous aura became even more shocking. Without the slightest hesitation, Mingyu waved his hands and arranged layers of defenses in front of him, not even hesitating to use a defensive emperor artifact that he had never used before. A red light suddenly appeared, followed by a loud noise that caused the entire world to hum. The place where the Red Devil Holy was located was instantly shrouded in a dazzling red light. The red light frantically spread outwards, and wherever it shrouded, everything turned into dust. The layers of defenses in front of Mingyu were torn apart like paper. The defensive emperor artifact flashed wildly, but it only lasted a breath of time before it shattered. Chapter 35-26. Bright Moon's eyes narrowed. While he continued to retreat, he kept setting up defenses in front of him. A moment later, the red light disappeared, and the world calmed down. Bright Moon stood in the air in a sorry state. His face was as white as paper, and blood was seeping out of his ears, nose, and mouth. The power of the Red Devil Demon Saint's self-destruction was smaller than he expected. At least it did not destroy this continent, but it did add to his injuries. The powerful vitality from the immortal tree's leaves circulated throughout his body, quickly healing his internal injuries. However, this was clearly not something that could be done in a short period of time. Back when he was injured by Xueli, he had spent 2 leaves and almost a year to completely recover. Ha 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 ha. Xueli's loud laughter quickly came from afar. He was clearly rushing over at top speed. Huobo, this is the first time I found you so pleasing to the eye. He did not expect that the wisp of Huobo's soul that he had saved by chance would have such an unexpected effect. Although the other demon saint were not weak, and most of them were even stronger than Huobo, if it was not Huobo this time, but someone else, perhaps they would not have been able to stop Bright Moon. After all, that guy was only 1 step away from the realm gate. Only Huobo's self-destruction technique could stop Bright Moon from breaking out. Specks of red light condensed in the air, and in the blink of an eye, they reconstructed the short and fat figure. The demon saint's self-destruction did not cost him his life. This should be the innate divine technique of the Red Devil clan. However, Huobo's current state was not good. His originally red body had clearly dimmed a bit, and his aura was somewhat weak. Clearly the self-destruction just now had cost him quite a bit. A divine technique like that could not be continuously used in such a short period of time, unless he really did not want to live anymore. Turning his head to look in the direction Xueli was coming from, the corner of Huobo's mouth twitched. He muttered a few words, but no one knew what he was saying. It seemed like he was cursing someone. Bright Moon's expression was as calm as water. He sighed slightly and did not sigh because he had failed at the last step. In his plan, it would be best if he could break out of the encirclement and leave, but there were 12 demon saints in the demon territory. If he really did break out, then they would not be worthy of being called demon saint. The situation in front of him was already foreseen, so there was nothing to feel regretful about. The path ahead was filled with thistles and thorns. The only way was to kill his way out. Of course. Yang. Looking at this situation, even if he waited for more than 10 days, it would not be his turn. Seeing this, Yang Kai turned his head and shouted to the people behind him, "Follow me." His legs clamped on Windchaser, and he rushed toward the realm gate in a threatening manner. Since it was not his turn, then he would not line up. Yang Kai barged his way through the densely packed demon race army by relying on Windchaser's power. 2 million soldiers followed closely behind him. His actions naturally attracted the attention of many demon race. They all turned their heads and glared at him. But in the demon territory, the fist was the law. Although there was no half-saint on Yang Kai's side, Windchaser's aura was not the slightest bit inferior to a half-saint's. Therefore, the ordinary demon race did not dare to act rashly. When they were 10 li away from the realm gate, a figure suddenly floated over and blocked in front of Yang Kai. He slightly raised his hand and shouted, "Halt! Scram, those who block me will die." Yang Kai did not have the time to talk nonsense with him. The battle in the Eternal Sky continent had already begun. Mingyue's life and death were unknown. He was anxious to personally investigate. At this time, even if there was a demon saint in front of him, he would still charge through, not to mention a half-saint. In other words, he was looking forward to someone blocking his way. He could use this person as an example to others. His embodiment had already advanced to half-saint. Windchaser had once hunted down a half-saint. It could be said that he had changed his gun for a cannon. It was unknown which race that half-saint belonged to. His complexion was incomparably yellow. The demon race that was passing through the realm gate was the army of the continent under his command. It was also because of this reason that he stepped forward to stop Yang Kai. Otherwise, who would be willing to meddle in other people's business? Originally, when he saw Yang Kai riding a demonic beast with a strong aura, he felt that this guy's origin was not ordinary. Therefore, he tried to persuade him. Who would have thought that the other party would not give him any face? This immediately made him burn with anger. Yang Kai's aura was not very strong. Even if this kind of person had some origin, it was still very limited. In any case, he was still a half-saint. Why would he need to be afraid of others? In his anger, He raised his hand and slapped towards Yang Kai. Rolling demonic energy surged out, and an explosion sounded in the air. He angrily shouted, "I think you are courting death." The might of a half-saint was naturally not weak. Yang Kai immediately felt his body tighten as the aura of death enveloped him. Just as he was hesitating whether to release his embodiment or not, Windchaser neighed, and its 4 hooves ignited with golden flames. It left a golden mark in the void. In a flash, it arrived in front of the half-saint. Soon after, it raised its body and stomped down with its front hooves. It was an ordinary attack, but it made the half-saint's complexion change greatly. He immediately raised his palm, and demonic energy surged out of his body. The moment the 2 palms and the 2 hooves collided, a terrifying power surged out. The half-saint was only able to resist for less than a breath of time. His whole body was like an arrow that was shot from a bow. He crashed to the ground below, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Windchaser seemed to want to chase after him, but Yang Kai grabbed his mane. He turned around and coldly looked around. Who else wants to stop me? The surrounding devil experts under the semi-sage realm retreated one after another. The remaining few semi-sage experts frowned as they looked at Windchaser. Soon, a look of surprise appeared in their eyes. Clearly, they had recognized Windchaser's origin. Although Yang Kai had been running around during this time to help the demon saint repair the realm gate in their territories, and because of this, he had met many half-saint. But in terms of fame, he was far inferior to Windchaser. This was the mount of the master of the 100-spirit continent, and it was famous. However, after a long period of silence, this legendary mount gradually disappeared from the world's sight. No one would have thought that it would appear again. Moreover, it was being ridden by a demon king. What was the origin of this guy? Although the relationship between the 100-spirit continent and the demon territory wasn't very good, Windchaser's identity was too unusual. If anyone dared to hurt this beast, the master of the 100-spirit continent would definitely kill his way out and turn the world upside down. So when Yang Kai asked that question, the half-saint remained silent. It wasn't that they were afraid of Yang Kai, but they were afraid that if they fought, they wouldn't be able to hold back and hurt Windchaser. Moreover, from the strength this beast had just displayed, even among the half-saint, it was an extremely strong existence. It was only limited by its low intelligence that it couldn't transform into a human form. The yellow-faced half-saint that had been stepped on by Windchaser flew up again. His face was terrifyingly gloomy. Just now, he had fallen into a disadvantage due to a moment of carelessness. It was really shameful, but he didn't have any intention of attacking again. Yang Kai glanced at him and didn't provoke him again. At this time, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. It was better to enter the Eternal Sky continent as soon as possible. He called out to his army, "Let's go." After saying that, he took the lead and rushed towards the realm gate. Behind him, Lao Ku and the others were drenched in cold sweat. They felt very guilty. Their king had Windchaser's protection, so even if they fought, it wouldn't be a problem. But it was hard to say how many of the 2 million soldiers would be left. Fortunately, those half-saints still restrained themselves. The 2 million soldiers only took half a day to pass through the realm gate. The main reason was that the realm gate was big enough to accommodate many people at once. Although they didn't appear in the same place, they were still within a radius of 1,000 miles. Yang Kai spent some time to regroup his army before setting off in a grandiose manner. From time to time, subtle vibrations would be transmitted from the heaven and earth. Some sounds could be heard coming from extremely far away, mixed with the aftermath of the battle. On the horizon, a faintly discernible light could be seen, showing that the battle was reaching its climax. Yang Kai raised his eyes to look, but couldn't see anything. After all, the real battlefield was too far away from here. Galloping all the way, they encountered many demon race armies that were rushing over. Yang Kai's mood became heavier and heavier. Looking at this situation, it seemed that the demon territory had already mobilized all of its forces. All the half-saint territory, and even the demon race that could fight had been pulled to the Eternal Sky continent. Such a big move, just to kill Mingyu. Yang Kai suddenly had a strange thought. If he could destroy the entire Eternal Sky continent, then the demon race would definitely be unable to recover from this setback. The crisis of the demon territory invading the star world would also be resolved in one fell swoop. But this thought only flashed through his mind for a moment before he gave up. He really didn't have the ability to do so. Passing through a mountain range, there were many people below. At the peak of the mountain, there was a large flag that reached the sky. The complicated patterns on the flag fluttered in the wind. Yang Kai frowned and looked around for a moment. Then, he asked the army behind him to wait for a moment and flew down alone on Windchaser. Before he even got close, a person looked over. For eyes met, and that person smiled at Yang Kai. He cupped his hands and said, "Brother Yang, we meet again." "So it's Brother Baiya. No wonder you looked familiar." Yang Kai flew over and looked at him condescendingly. The person guarding this mountain peak was actually the half-saint Baiya under Bei Limo's command. Previously, when Yang Kai was repairing the realm gate in Bei Limo's territory, they had a lot of dealings with each other, so they could be considered acquaintances. Baiya looked Windchaser up and down, and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He smiled and said, "Brother Yang, this mount of yours is really extraordinary. Where did you get it?" Yang Kai laughed and said, "I picked it up on the road." The other party obviously recognized Windchaser and asked this question just to confirm. It was the same whether he answered or not. Chapter 35-27. Baiya's mouth twitched when she heard this. She looked back at the direction of the battlefield and said slowly, "Brother Yang, did you also come here to try your luck under the order of the Lord? What luck? What luck could there be here?" Yang Kai was confused. He did not receive any order at all. He just trespassed into this place without permission. It was not good for him to ask more, so he said, "That's right. Isn't Brother Baiya the same?" Baiya smiled bitterly and shook her head. "Of course, but I would rather not come. But the Lord has ordered me to come." Yang Kai nodded and said, "This place is extremely dangerous and not everyone wants to come here. But since we're already here, why should we sigh and lament? Every dog has its day. And this year, when it comes to my family, perhaps Brother Boyu will have a stroke of good luck." Baiya laughed and said, "Although I would like to thank you for your kind words, I know my own situation. If a fight breaks out, I'm afraid I don't have much of a chance." She suddenly turned to look at Yang Kai. Her eyes lit up and she said, "But Brother Yang, you have a better chance than anyone else." "What do you mean by better? What are you talking about?" Yang Kai wanted to ask clearly, but he had already pretended to know before. He could not bring himself to ask again, so he pretended to be confused and said, "Brother Baiya, I don't understand what you mean. You don't have much of a chance, so why would I have a chance?" "Because you are from the astral world. You have the same origin as it." Baiya replied matter-of-factly, "What does this have to do with being from the astral world? What does it have to do with the same origin?" He felt like his heart was being scratched by a cat. He wanted to pry open Baiya's mouth and ask her clearly. However, he put on a look of realization and said, "I see. Haha, thank you for your kind words, Brother Baiya." Boya's expression turned solemn as he said, "Even if that's the case, this king won't be courteous when the time comes. If I accidentally injure Brother Yang, I hope Brother Yang won't blame me." Yang Kai laughed and said, "Life and death are decreed by fate. Riches and honor are determined by the heavens. Since this king has already come here, he is naturally mentally prepared." Baiya nodded slightly and said, "Brother Yang is free and easy. Brother Yang, please go ahead. We may have to wait for a few more days. Then I'll take my leave." Yang Kai turned chasing wind, walked a few steps, then turned back and asked, "Excuse me, where should I go?" Baiya pointed and said, "The half-saint under Holy Senior Rumeng is in charge of guarding that direction. You can go and meet up with the others." "So that's how it is." Yang Kai glanced at the large flag that was fluttering in the wind, and his eyes flashed with understanding. It seemed that the half-saint from the demon territory had already surrounded the battlefield. Each demon saint's half-saint was in charge of a region of the territory. After bidding farewell to Baiya, Yang Kai turned back and called for his 2 million troops and rushed in the direction Baiya had indicated. Half a day later, he saw another big flag on another mountain. The pattern on the flag was exactly the same as the pattern on the token that Yu Rumeng had given him before. Needless to say, this should be the place where Yu Rumeng's subordinates gathered. Yang Kai rode wind-chasing wind and flew down. He glanced around and didn't see any acquaintances. Speaking of which, he didn't know many of the half-saint subordinates under Yu Rumeng. The ones he was most familiar with were Bai Zhua and Yu Sang. The former was close to Yu Sang, while the latter was hostile. Although he had met a few other half-saint before, he didn't have a deep relationship with them. He had only exchanged a few words when he was repairing the realm gate on their continent. Furthermore, the half-saint sitting on the mountain peak was quite unfamiliar to Tang Wulin. He was extremely burly and muscular, and generally speaking, devilish beings of his stature were either power devils or stone devils. Without fighting him, Yang Kai couldn't tell which race he was from. However, what surprised Yang Kai was that as soon as he flew down, the half-saint coldly glanced at him. Then, his eyes revealed a look of disgust and hatred, as if he didn't like him. Yang Kai was puzzled. He didn't know how he had offended this guy. However, since this half-saint was in charge of the matters here, Yang Kai could only go forward and ask. When he approached, Yang Kai cupped his hands and said, "Cloud Shadow Yang Kai, may I ask how to address this friend?" The burly half-saint's eyes were cold, and the corners of his mouth curved into a playful smile. He didn't seem to have any intention of responding to Yang Kai. Instead, he looked at wind-chasing wind. Yang Kai said it again, but the other party didn't respond. This time, Yang Kai was sure that this guy really didn't like him. This made him a little confused. He was sure that this was the first time he had met this guy. There was no conflict between them, so he didn't know why the other party was showing such a sour face. What's more, he had a relationship with Yu Rumeng. The half-saint under Yu Rumeng's command were not polite to him, but they should at least maintain some semblance of courtesy. The other party clearly didn't give him any face, so Yang Kai didn't know what he was trying to do. Since he didn't respond after asking twice, Yang Kai was too lazy to say anything more. He looked around, nodded slightly, turned around, and called out to the army behind him. They crossed the mountain and continued forward. After Yang Kai left, the burly demon saint summoned a demon king and whispered in his ear, "Send a message, say that the human has appeared. If you want to make a move, do it before the saint arrives." The demon king accepted the order and left, disappearing quickly. "My king," that was Di Li's master. After walking for some distance, Yin said softly. She also saw that Yang Kai was defeated over there, so she naturally had to explain the reason to Yang Kai. Yang Kai secretly remembered this name and frowned. "When did we provoke that guy?" Yin shook her head and said, "No, but..." She glanced at Yang Kai and hesitated. Yang Kai said, "Just say it." Yin said, "Master Di Li and Master Yueseng have a good relationship." Tukuro also nodded and said, "Yes, when Master Yueseng was still in La Yuan, Master Di Li often came over to drink and have fun with Master. Drinking and meet friends." Yang Kai suddenly realized. He looked back and sneered softly. "He is standing up for Yueseng." Yueseng was sent to the two-realm battlefield because of him, and it was unknown whether she was alive or dead. This was something that everyone knew. Yu Rumeng also intended to use this action to show all the half-saint subordinates that she valued Yang Kai, but she didn't expect that she would inadvertently bring hatred to Yang Kai. Since Di Li and Yueseng had a good relationship, it was natural that he didn't like him. It would be strange if he gave him a good face. Yang Kai didn't take it to heart, mainly because he wasn't in the mood to bother about it. Now that he had arrived at the Eternal Heaven continent, he naturally had to pay attention to Mingyue's movements. Not long after, he found a valley 50 kilometers away from the mountain where the flag was, and ordered the army to set up camp. Yang Kai rode on Windchaser and stood high in the sky, looking into the distance with a worried expression. Since entering the Eternal Heaven continent, he could clearly feel the intensity of the battle in the distance. It didn't stop for a moment. Inferring from the aura fluctuating in the distance, Mingyue had more than one enemy at the moment. Outnumbered, Yang Kai didn't know how long Mingyue could hold on, but if she only focused on escaping, there might be a chance. At this time he couldn't intervene at all. Maybe he would be torn to pieces by the aftermath of the battle, before he could even get close to the battlefield. Now he could only wait and see if the situation would take a turn for the better. But what made him feel a little strange was that not all 12 demon saints were present. There shouldn't be more than 3 people fighting with Mingyue. So the question was, where were the other demon saints? A great battle had already broken out here, so those demon saints should have arrived long ago. Where was Yu Rumeng? He didn't see any trace of Bei Limo at Bai Ye's place before, so this discovery puzzled him. After thinking for a while, Yang Kai called Lao Ku and asked him to send people to scout the situation. This area of the territory was the responsibility of the half-saint under Yu Rumeng's command, so he should be able to find 1 or 2 half-saint they were familiar with to ask. A dozen or so demon race squads quickly set off, going in different directions. After waiting for half a day, news came back. Yang Kai immediately picked a squad to follow him in a certain direction. 2 hours later, Yang Kai saw Bai Zhuo on a mountain peak. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Yang Kai asked curiously, "Didn't you go to the Two-Realm battlefield? How come you have time to come back?" If he remembered correctly, Bai Zhuo did say that he was going to return to the Two-Realm battlefield. Yang Kai didn't expect to see him here. Bai Zhuo smiled bitterly and said, "Such a big thing happened here, so of course I had to come back." Basically all the half-saint from the Two-Realm battlefield have returned, except for a few who stayed behind to keep watch. They're all back. Yang Kai's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but look around with a vigilant look on his face. Bai Zhuo couldn't help but laugh when he saw this. "Don't worry, Yu Sang didn't receive the transfer order. He's still there." Yang Kai rubbed his nose and said embarrassedly, "I'm not looking for him." Actually, he was looking for him. He couldn't withstand a sneak attack from a half-saint, even if he had Jue Feng to protect him. However, even Bai Zhuo was transferred back, but Yu Sang was abandoned there. This showed Yu Rumeng's attitude. "Where is the Holy Senior now?" Yang Kai changed the topic and asked. Bai Zhuo looked at him strangely. "Didn't you receive the Holy Senior's message?" "Yes," Yang Kai lied through his teeth. "But the Holy Senior only asked me to come here, and she didn't say anything else." Bai Zhuo was skeptical, but when he thought about how much Yu Rumeng valued Yang Kai, he didn't think too much about it. He stopped talking and quietly sent a voice transmission. "The Holy Senior is injured, and she's healing now." Yang Kai's face froze. "How did the Holy Senior get injured? Is it serious?" Bai Zhuo shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be serious. The Holy Senior said that she would definitely come here. As for how she got injured," he looked into the distance and whispered, "it should be related to the matter here." Yang Kai was excited when he heard this. Before, he was worried that Mingyu couldn't handle the situation alone. But he didn't expect Mingyu to hurt Yu Rumeng. Mingyu was the great emperor, so powerful. Chapter 35-28. Not only is Saint Sovereign Dreamlike injured, but most of the other Saint Sovereigns are also injured. Without waiting for Yang Kai to digest the previous piece of information, Bai Zhuo threw out an even more shocking piece of information. Yang Kai stared at him dumbfounded. His face was filled with disbelief, and he instinctively felt that it was impossible. If Mingyu had injured a demon saint in such a situation, it would have made some sense, but to injure 2, 3, or even, this was simply unrealistic. It was not that Yang Kai was looking down on Mingyu, but the demon saint was not made of mud. How could they be so weak? However, Bai Zhuo's words were so vivid that he had no choice but to believe it. He hurriedly asked, "What exactly happened?" Bai Zhuo slowly shook his head and said, "I don't know the exact situation. The Saint Sovereign did not explain it clearly. She only told us to seal off the battlefield and assist the 2 Saint Sovereigns, Xueli and Huobo, in order to prevent the great emperors from acting out of desperation." Xueli and Huobo. Yang Kai secretly committed these 2 names to memory. If he wasn't mistaken, then these 2 should be the ones fighting with Mingyu at the moment. This was also consistent with the information he sensed before. However, what had happened in the half a month before his arrival that allowed Mingyu to heavily injure most of the demon saint in the demon territory? To be able to have such divine might in prison, Should it be said that they were indeed the great emperors? Brother Baizhua, do you know the situation over there? Yang Kai suppressed the shock in his heart and asked. Baizhua smiled bitterly and said, I don't know either. However, with the two saint sovereigns, Xueli and Hobo, working together, that great emperors definitely won't have an easy time. This was what Yang Kai could not understand the most. So many demon saint had been injured by Mingyu, so how could the two of them hold him back? Could it be that Mingyu had used some extremely powerful secret technique that caused him to be heavily injured? That was why he was unable to do it. However, this did not make sense. Suddenly, Yang Kai thought of another question. Saint Exalt Dreamlike hasn't arrived here yet? Baizhua shook his head, indicating that it was true. Since the original body was injured even before reaching this place, there could only be one reason. Yang Kai suddenly realized that it was related to the soul-splitting technique. Perhaps the split souls of the demon saint were destroyed by Bright Moon, which was why so many of them were injured. Since he couldn't get any more information from Baizhua, Yang Kai could only hurry back. His mind was in a mess. Logically speaking, this was undoubtedly the best time for him to rescue Mingyu. Most of the demon saint were still recuperating, and only Xueli and Hobo were dealing with Mingyu in the entire Eternal Heaven continent. However, with his thin arms and legs, even if he ran over, he would only cause trouble for Mingyu. However, if he continued to wait and waited for those demon saint to arrive, there would be even less of a chance. When he returned to the encampment in a daze, he saw a noisy scene. It seemed that something had happened. Moreover, other than the 2 million troops he brought, there was another group of people gathered here. Their numbers were no less than his own, and he didn't know where they had come from. At this moment, both sides were confronting each other. Lao Ku-in and the other demon king, who had stayed behind to guard this place, all had nervous and uneasy expressions. The former even had a smile on his face, as he continuously cupped his hands towards the other side. However, the group of demon kings on the other side clearly didn't appreciate it. A demon king shouted, I'll give you a stick of incense's time to scram. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. What was going on? There were still people who came to fight over territory. What was there to fight over in this territory? Yang Kai's eyes widened. Although he didn't know what was going on, he was currently feeling vexed. His stomach full of anxiety and depression instantly turned into anger. He clamped his legs on chasing wind and directly charged into the crowd. He even shouted in a low voice, Scram! Scram! The large army in front of him blocked the path, and the heads were densely packed. However, chasing wind was very fierce. He didn't care about anything as he charged forward, opening up a path like a hot knife through butter. Some of the demon race wanted to resist, but they were all knocked to the side by him. Immediately, their bones and tendons were broken, and they screamed in pain. This unforeseen event happened too suddenly, and the other side actually didn't have time to react. When Yang Kai led his team back to the front of the army, he saw a group of demon kings glaring at him. Yang Kai coldly swept his gaze across, ignoring the demon kings as if they were nothing. His gaze fixed on a female demon race with an enchanting figure and a charming face. It just so happened that this female demon race was also looking at him. Their eyes met, and Yang Kai raised his eyebrows. The other party raised the corner of her mouth, revealing a meaningful smile. Half-saint. When he saw so many people suddenly arrive, Yang Kai guessed that there was a half-saint leading the team. Now that he looked at it, it was indeed the case. Moreover, this half-saint should be from the same race as Yu Meng, and they were both succubus demon. Although she didn't say anything, nor did she show any signs of using any secret techniques, she was constantly emitting a seductive aura. This caused many of the male demon race subordinates to reveal expressions of being captivated by her. Although he knew that he couldn't blame them, and that the charm of a succubus demon half-saint wasn't something that could be easily resisted, Yang Kai still felt somewhat displeased. With a wave of his hand, Lao Ku immediately walked over. What's the situation? Yang Kai stared at the female succubus demon as he asked this question. His eyes didn't even blink, revealing a dense gloominess. Lao Ku bitterly said, My king, this master said that this is the territory that they are responsible for guarding. And he wants us to move our position. When Yang Kai heard this, he couldn't help but sneer. There's such a thing? A demon king on the opposite side immediately stepped out and shouted, under the command of Master Di Li, we have sealed off 1,000 miles of defensive line here. Unrelated people quickly retreat. Now he had become unrelated people. Yang Kai was somewhat speechless. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the female succubus demon. Miss, what's your name? Impudent. The demon king that spoke before immediately shouted angrily. At the same time, he stepped forward and stared at Yang Kai. In front of the master, get down and speak. After saying this, he raised his hand to grab Yang Kai. It looked like he really wanted to grab him. Zhui Feng hissed and was about to counterattack. Yang Kai was faster than him. He raised his palm and pressed it down. The laws in his palm fluctuated, and time seemed to stop at this moment. Flowing time, great emperor, withering glory, like a shuttle, like a dream. The demon king that made a move didn't have time to react to what had happened. When he came back to his senses, he felt a huge force imprint on his chest. With a stuffy groan, he was sent flying. His body was in the air, and his vitality was quickly draining away. With a whoosh, an arrow pierced through the air and accurately nailed the hand that made a move, directly exploding that hand into a bloody mist. When the demon king landed, his hair had already turned white. He held his broken arm and looked up in horror. Not far away, Yang Kai slowly withdrew his palm. The bow in the hands of a female feather demon beside him trembled, and her beautiful eyes were cold. With a strange sound, demon essence soared into the sky. Affected by the unforeseen event just now, the two armies were like fire and water. They were ready to fight. Yang Kai slightly raised his hand, stopping the restlessness of the people below. At the same time, he grinned at the female succubus demon. Manage your people well. Next time he won't be so lucky. The female succubus demon turned her head to look at the injured demon king. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of coldness as she shouted, "Trash!" While speaking, she flicked her finger, and a faint light hit the demon king's head. The demon king's eyes immediately widened, and he fell down, his vitality quickly dissipating. A high-ranked demon king had been killed by her without hesitation. After doing this, the female succubus demon turned her head to size up Yang Kai. The corner of her mouth curled up into a smile again, and a charming expression appeared. "You're that human that the saint values so much?" Yang Kai raised his eyebrows and said, "You know very well." The female succubus demon covered her mouth and giggled. "Everyone was talking about you, so naturally I heard some things. I was a little interested in you, but now it seems that you're just so-so." Yang Kai chuckled and said, "That's because you don't have a deep understanding of this king. If you did, I believe you'd be more interested in this king." On the side, Li Shiqing turned her head to look at Yang Kai. Her face was slightly red, clearly not used to these words. However, the female succubus demon giggled. "I'm a little interested in you now." Yang Kai's face turned cold. "Unfortunately, I'm not interested in you at all. Stop talking nonsense. What do you want? Just say it." The smile on the female succubus demon's face gradually disappeared, and she said with a little disinterest, "As long as you're not deaf, you should have heard what I said just now. This is the place that I'm responsible for guarding. Although I don't know why you're here, it's obviously against the rules. Please move to another place." Yang Kai snorted coldly. "What rules? Who set the rules?" "Of course, it's the rules set by Di Li." The female succubus demon looked at him. "He's responsible for dispatching and arranging the various troops under the saint. You should be in your own place, and not here." "It's Di Li again." Yang Kai's eyes turned cold. Was she looking for trouble? Yang Kai laughed and said, "I don't know who Di Li is. I only know that when I brought people here, there was no one here. Now this is my territory. You brought people here to show off your power, and now you want to drive me away. Do you think I won't agree with you?" The female succubus demon frowned. "But this is indeed the place that Di Li arranged for me to guard. You should ask Di Li where you want to go." "I said that I don't know that guy. I'm only under the jurisdiction of the saint, and I don't need to listen to his orders." Yang Kai waved his hand impatiently. "Take your people and get out of here." Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. The female succubus demon was so angry that her face turned gloomy. How dare a mere human talk to me like this? Yang Kai was about to retort, but unexpectedly, the demon didn't give him a chance to speak. She flicked her wrist, and a soft whip was pulled out in the air and rolled towards him with the power of wind and thunder. At the critical moment, Yang Kai lowered his body to avoid the attack, and the soft whip directly hit the Cloud Shadow Army. Screams were heard, and the Cloud Shadow Army immediately suffered many casualties. Yang Kai looked back and was furious. How dare you attack me? You're courting death. As soon as these words fell, Yang Kai and his mount rushed forward. Wind Chaser's 4 hooves ignited with golden flames, as it carried Yang Kai into the enemy army like a bolt of lightning, sweeping through everything in its path. Numerous demon race cultivators were swept aside like weeds. Chapter 35-29. Yang Kai could clearly feel Zhui Feng's excitement. This guy seemed to be extremely familiar with charging and fighting. Thinking about how he was once Chang Tian's mount, it was not surprising that he had accompanied Chang Tian on countless expeditions for countless years. Zhui Feng estimated that his fighting instincts had already become a brand in the depths of his soul, and after many years of living a peaceful life, he had long been unable to restrain his wild and restless heart. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he not properly vent it? Wherever the crowd was densely packed, Zhui Feng would charge forward, one man and one mount directly plowing through the opposing army. As flesh and blood flew, screams rang out endlessly. Even the Demon King was unable to block Zhui Feng's charge, dying on the spot if he was too slow to dodge. In order to cooperate with Zhui Feng, Yang Kai flipped his hand and took out a long spear from his space ring. He did not know when he had obtained this spear, but Yang Kai had never refined it before, so now he could only use it as an ordinary weapon, unable to display its original power. Even so, with Yang Kai's tyrannical physique, he was able to display great lethality with this spear in his hand. As he stabbed forward, blood splattered everywhere, and howls of anguish rang out. A sharp and ear-piercing sound suddenly rang out, turning into an invisible force that broke through Yang Kai's spiritual energy defenses and directly entered his mind. It turned out that the female succubus demon had seen that Yang Kai and his mount were unstoppable and had taken the initiative to attack. She was a half-saint and a succubus demon, so this howl contained an extremely powerful spiritual energy. Zhui Feng's pace paused slightly, apparently affected by this howl, and Yang Kai's body swayed, almost falling off Zhui Feng's back. Fortunately, the soul-warming lotus emitted a cool aura at the critical moment, allowing him to regain his senses. The sound of something breaking through the air resounded in his ears. It seemed that there was a fierce attack coming from behind. Yang Kai instinctively raised his spear to block, but his arm was shocked by a strong force, and his spear flew out of his hand. Turning his head to look, he saw that the succubus demon had a mocking smile on her face. The soft whip in her hand coiled around his spear and drew a circle in the air before ruthlessly smashing down on him. In an instant, the sound of wind and thunder resounded, and the aura of death enveloped him. Yang Kai suddenly clamped down on Zhui Feng. In a flash, Zhui Feng's body suddenly turned, narrowly avoiding this attack. With a loud boom, a huge crater appeared in the ground. The surrounding demon race, both allies and enemies alike, were sent flying. Without waiting for Yang Kai to recover, the whip struck again. Fortunately, Wind Chaser's ability to adapt was not bad. The moment he turned around, he had already charged at the female succubus demon. Although it seemed clumsy, it dodged the attack of the soft whip in an exquisite manner. In the blink of an eye, it was within 10 meters of its opponent. Riding on Zhui Feng's back, Yang Kai could clearly see the panic in the female succubus demon's eyes. Although she was also a half-saint, from her race and the demonic treasures she used, it could be seen that she was not good at close combat. She could only display her full strength from a distance. When Zhui Feng rushed in front of her, she naturally panicked. However, she was still a half-saint, so she had the ability to remain calm. Her beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness, and she actually ignored Zhui Feng. She looked up at Yang Kai's eyes and shook her whip, turning it into several circles that enveloped Yang Kai. Yang Kai flicked his wrist and summoned the myriad sword. When he activated his Emperor's Qi, the sword light flew upwards like a waterfall. However, how could a half-saint's attack be so easily broken? When the sword light disappeared, it only delayed the speed of the whip. Seeing that he was about to be bound by the other party's whip, Yang Kai could only use his space principles to teleport away. Otherwise, if he was really bound by her whip, he would be at a complete disadvantage. Now that he was counting on Wind Chaser, he could at least put up a fight against the other party, and perhaps even cause her some suffering. Moreover, if he left Zhui Feng, it would be more convenient for him to display his full strength. Although the fight was short, Yang Kai could feel that because Zhui Feng had to protect him, Zhui Feng was somewhat restrained. On the other hand, there was only one half-saint in the enemy's camp that could threaten his safety. Besides this succubus, he really didn't take the others seriously. After reappearing, Yang Kai stood in the void and looked over. He saw that Zhui Feng was already fighting with the female succubus demon. Zhui Feng's attacks could be said to be very simple. It was nothing more than charging, biting, shaking its head and tail, and using its 4 hooves. On the other hand, the female succubus demon had a lot of tricks up her sleeves. She used all kinds of secret techniques, but the two were still evenly matched. From this, it could be seen that Zhui Feng's strength was quite good among the half-saint. At the very least, he was a bit stronger than the female succubus demon. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stabilize the situation. If the fight went on for a long time, with his endurance, he would definitely be able to gain the upper hand. In the past, he had chased after a half-saint for a long time. He had only stopped when his opponent's cultivation had dropped. How could he not have some endurance? Below, millions of demon race soldiers were also fighting. There were constantly demon race soldiers falling down. Both sides had casualties. This made Yang Kai feel a bit confused. How did the situation turn out like this? He didn't bring these 2 million soldiers to fight with the other half-saint soldiers. He wanted to see if he could use this army to do something at a crucial moment. Now that the situation had turned out like this, it was true that he hadn't dealt with it properly. But the main reason was that the other side was too overbearing. They had killed many of his people without saying anything, so he couldn't easily give up. It was just a piece of territory. The defensive line outside the battlefield was so long, so why did the other side have to fight over this territory? Just as he was thinking this, Yang Kai suddenly felt a trace of uneasiness in his heart. This feeling of uneasiness came out of nowhere, and came without any warning. It was as if a great danger was approaching him. Looking up, Zhui Feng had already disappeared. He didn't know where he had gone with the female succubus demon. That feeling of uneasiness became even more intense. All the pores on his body shrank, and his skin turned cold. Without even thinking, Yang Kai's figure blurred and turned into nothingness. He had exiled himself into the void. At this moment, a figure strangely appeared beside him. A powerful punch slammed into the place where he had been standing. A berserk power erupted, and the aftermath of the attack spread out, penetrating through the void. Even though he had used the Nihility secret technique, Yang Kai still felt his blood boil. His vision darkened, and he almost fainted. He hurriedly teleported away from that dangerous place, and appeared 3,000 meters away. He looked up and his pupils shrank. He clenched his teeth and shouted, "You sang!" The person who had launched a sneak attack and almost killed him on the spot was actually Yu Sang, who should still be in the two-realm battlefield. Yang Kai hadn't seen this guy since the last time they parted in the holy city of the Phantom Continent. Yu Rumeng had also said that he had been sent to the two-realm battlefield. Bai Zhua had confirmed this. Even just now, Bai Zhua had said that Yu Sang was still guarding the two-realm battlefield. So Yang Kai never expected that Yu Sang had actually returned to the demon territory and was even ambushing him here. Yang Kai lowered his head and looked at the several million demon race troops entangled below, then turned his head to look at where Dili was. Thinking about the female succubus demon's attitude and actions, Yang Kai's face became gloomy. This was a trap set up by 3 half-saint realm experts. First, Dili didn't assign him a territory to defend. Then, The female succubus demon deliberately came over to fight with him for territory, then lured Jue Feng away. Finally, it was Yu Sang who attacked. Thinking about the crisis just now, Yang Kai's forehead couldn't help but drip with cold sweat. At the same time his anger was surging. These three half-saint realm experts didn't hesitate to join hands to kill him. They really gave him face. Yu Sang looked surprised. It seemed that he didn't expect that his sneak attack actually didn't take Yang Kai's life. Although it seemed that he had injured Yang Kai, it was somewhat unreasonable for a half-saint like him to let Yang Kai escape. The space divine technique really lived up to its reputation. But that was it. He didn't hesitate to violate Yu Rumeng's order and rush back from the two-realm battlefield. Firstly, he wanted to take Yang Kai's life. Secondly, he wanted to fight for the opportunity that belonged to him in the upcoming unforeseen events. The second reason was the most important. As for taking Yang Kai's life, it was only a side benefit. He secretly hated Yu Rumeng for not informing him of such a good opportunity. If he didn't have some connections, he really wouldn't have known that there was such a huge opportunity in the Eternal Heaven continent. It wasn't that he didn't know that Yu Rumeng valued Yang Kai. After mingling in the two-realm battlefield for so long, he had already investigated the matters between Yang Kai and Yu Rumeng. He was even more clear about the consequences if he killed Yang Kai. However, this wasn't enough to make him shrink back. As long as he could seize the opportunity in the next mini-demon saint schemes, even Yu Rumeng wouldn't be able to easily kill him. At that time, the other demon saint wouldn't agree to it. Therefore, Yang Kai had to die today. Moreover, he had to kill him with his own hands. Only in this way could he vent the hatred in his heart. Their eyes met. Yu Sang's gaze was disdainful, and his voice was cold. Do you think you'll be safe and sound with the saint protecting you? If I want to kill you, it'll be as easy as flicking my finger. Yang Kai turned his head and spat out the blood in his mouth. He sneered. You returned from the two-realm battlefield without permission. Let's see how you explain this to the saint. Yu Sang's eyes drooped. Explain? If I want to return, I'll return. Why do I need to explain anything to the saint? If you have time to worry about me, why don't you worry about yourself? Yang Kai said with a calm face. Do you really dare to kill me? Yu Sang looked at him playfully. What do you think? Yang Kai looked left and right for a moment. Instead of answering, he asked. It looks like you're determined to kill me. I'm actually very curious. How did you persuade Di Li and that female succubus demon to help you? Don't tell me they don't know the consequences of doing so. If Yu Rumeng found out that they had colluded with Yu Sang to kill him, would she let it go? Chapter 35:30. Even if those two were half-saint, they would probably follow in Yu Sang's footsteps and be sent to the two-realm battlefield to fight against those fake emperors. If they were lucky, they could make up for their mistakes. If they were unlucky, they could only die there. As the war of the two realms intensified, more than one or two half-saint and fake emperors had fallen. Yu Sang said indifferently, No one helped me. I just happened to be there at the right time. Yang Kai's eyes widened in anger. Although he knew that Yu Sang was spouting nonsense to get rid of those two, there was no big problem with this excuse. Not to mention that he had only met Di Li once, and there was no conflict between them. Even the female succubus demon had a good reason to fight with him. Therefore, even if the matter reached Yu Rumeng, those two could say that it was a misunderstanding. Of course, in the end, it still depended on which side Yu Rumeng was on. If she was on his side, it would be useless even if they tried to defend themselves. I hope the Lord will believe you. Yang Kai snorted coldly. Yu Sang raised his hand and said indifferently, Between me and a dead person, who do you think the Lord will believe? The moment he said the last word, he had already slapped Yang Kai with his palm. There was an explosive sound in the air. As the hand slapped down, it was as if an invisible mountain was pressing down on him. Yang Kai only hesitated for a moment before he heard the bones in his body cracking. His whole body was like a meteorite falling from the sky, crashing into the ground with a loud bang, and creating a big hole in the ground. Yu Sang's body did not move. He floated over strangely and quickly approached. There was a whooshing sound as a sharp arrow, emitting an incandescent light, attacked from the side. It arrived in the blink of an eye and shot straight at Yu Sang's chest. Yu Sang did not even look at it. He just waved his hand, and the light that shot out returned to where it came from at an even faster speed. There was a scream as Boya, who was hiding in the dark to launch a sneak attack, brushed past the light. She was flipped a few times by the powerful force and fell to the ground. No one knew whether she was dead or alive. The ground was quickly dyed red with blood. At the same time, Yang Kai struggled to get up. His mouth and nose were full of blood, his hair was messy, and he looked very sorry. However, just as he bent his body, Yu Sang had already floated in front of him and raised his hand. Yang Kai's direction. The fragrance of flowers permeated the air as colorful petals floated over from some unknown place. In the blink of an eye, they had surrounded Yang Kai's body, forming an impenetrable barrier around him. The fragrance of the flowers seemed to have the magical effect of seducing one's mind. Not far from Boya, Li Shiqing bit her red lips and formed a series of hand seals, her body releasing a five-colored light as her emperor chi surged. Although her beautiful eyes were filled with fear and timidity, her expression was resolute. Yu Sang turned his head and looked at her coldly, snorting coldly. A surge of spiritual energy burst out from Li Shiqing's chest as a flash of light appeared and disappeared. Her tender body trembled slightly as her emperor chi collapsed, and she fell limply to the ground. As she fainted, the flower petals that surrounded Yang Kai also collapsed. After dealing with the two little mice that had interfered with him, Yu Sang looked at Yang Kai calmly. The corners of his mouth curled into a cruel smile, as if he had obtained great pleasure. He pointed his finger at Yang Kai's forehead and said, "Do you regret offending me? Do you think this king can't do anything to you just because you're proficient in space principles? Now that we're so close and this king's divine sense has locked onto you, don't even think about escaping." Regret. Yang Kai gritted his teeth and growled. The space principles around him fluctuated, and a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. A cold voice came from behind this figure. "Fuck you." Yu Sang's expression was one of astonishment as he stared at the stone man that had suddenly appeared in front of him. No matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't figure out where this guy had jumped out from. Just a moment ago, there was no trace of it at all, but it had inexplicably appeared in front of him. He didn't have time to think too much, because the stone man had unhurriedly thrown a punch at him as soon as he appeared. Judging from the power of the punch, the stone man who had suddenly appeared was actually a half-step saint. Under the stimulation of his demonic chi, the power of his finger became even stronger. Since his opponent was a half-saint, Yu Sang didn't dare to lower his guard. Damn it! Why is there a half-saint beside that human? Yu Sang had thought that it would be foolproof if Shui Feng was lured away, but he hadn't expected such an unforeseen event to occur. Yu Sang's heart sank as he faintly felt that the situation was not good. With a half-saint interfering with his energy, it would be very difficult to kill Yang Kai. As his thoughts fluctuated, their attacks had already collided. Yu Sang's eyes suddenly shrank as he revealed a look of horror. His body instinctively swayed as he retreated. In the blink of an eye, he had floated 1,000 feet away. When he looked down, his face suddenly became gloomy. This was because one of his fingers had been twisted beyond recognition. The bones were almost completely shattered, and a heart-wrenching pain was transmitted from his finger, stimulating every nerve in his body. With just one attack, his finger had been crippled. If he hadn't reacted quickly and retreated in time, he was afraid that even his arm would have been lost to that stone man. What great strength! That attack just now didn't show any trace of demonic chi. It was just a burst of pure strength, but it still broke through his defense and injured him. In the entire demon territory, perhaps only a half-saint with a power demon background could possess such terrifying strength. That's not right. Even a demi-sage from the power demon clan would be somewhat inferior in comparison. What race was this stone man from? A stone demon? A power demon? It didn't look like one. Roar! The embodiment opened his mouth and roared. His voice was mixed with uncontrollable excitement. His intelligence was a wisp of Yang Kai's soul, so he had the same origin as Yang Kai. He wasn't a person who liked killing and fighting. But after experiencing full strength, he naturally couldn't suppress his excitement. Amidst the roar, demonic chi soared into the sky and his body ignited with black flames. His entire body seemed to have turned into a black hole that could devour everything. Sharp bone spurs drilled out of the surface of his body. He stretched out his hand and grasped the void, holding a war hammer in his hand. Demonic chi flowed, and the war hammer trembled slightly. In an instant, an extremely dangerous aura fluctuated. Yu Sang had not recovered from the shock of being injured by a single blow. After feeling this aura, she could not help but widen her eyes and stare at the demonic warhammer. She cried out involuntarily, "Divine weapon!" In the demon territory, only the demonic treasures that Demon Saint had painstakingly refined could be called sacred tools. In the entire demon territory, the number of sacred tools didn't exceed 20. It could be said that each sacred tool was an extremely rare existence. Similarly, each sacred tool could display great power. Most of these sacred tools were controlled by the 12 Demon Saint. Only a few of them were wandering outside, and their whereabouts were unknown. The demonic war hammer in the embodiment's hand was obtained by Yang Kai outside Maplewood City. It was the weapon of the ancient one-eyed giant demon. However, because Yang Kai and the embodiment didn't have demonic chi, no one had been able to activate its true power all these years. Occasionally, the embodiment would use it, but it was just like an ordinary weapon. But now it was different. The embodiment had devoured the origin of the Cloud Shadow mainland in the nest of myriad demons. All of his power had been transformed into demonic chi, and he had completely become a half-saint in the demon territory. He was qualified to activate the power of this demonic warhammer. With the warhammer in hand, the embodiment's originally strong power suddenly increased by several levels. The embodiment clearly felt this. The demonic chi in his body almost uncontrollably rushed toward the warhammer. The originally deathly still warhammer seemed to have been reborn at this moment. A kind of jubilant mood was transmitted from the warhammer, thirsting for more demonic chi. Looking down, the embodiment sneered. When he activated the heaven-devouring Great Emperor battle technique, he immediately cut off the warhammer's devouring. No matter what kind of secret treasure it was based on the person. How could the embodiment tolerate the warhammer's crazy devouring, as if it wanted to take the initiative? It had always been the embodiment devouring others. If the warhammer wanted to devour his demonic chi, it would have to ask for his permission. With the warhammer in hand, the embodiment leaped up and smashed the warhammer at Yu Sang from a distance of several thousand feet. Immediately, a huge warhammer shadow appeared in the void, almost covering the entire sky. As the warhammer shadow smashed down, it seemed as if the sky had collapsed. Yu Sang's complexion changed greatly. His whole body shook. With him as the center, a large blood fog filled the surrounding dozens of miles. When he looked up, a large space was covered by the blood fog. Yu Sang was nowhere to be seen. The warhammer shadow smashed into the blood fog, smashing a huge hole in it. But soon, the surrounding blood fog filled the hole again. Streaks of blood-red light were shot out from the blood mist, shooting toward the embodiment like arrows. The embodiment nimbly dodged a few of them, but he was still hit. Suddenly, a sizzling sound was heard from the surface of his body. The burning blood of the black flame was on par with the attack. After a moment of hesitation, the embodiment plunged into the blood fog. In an instant, there were bursts of roaring and bursting sounds coming from inside. Obviously, he was fighting with Yu Sang like fire and water. At the same time, Yang Kai had flashed to Boya and Li Shiqing's side. When he was in danger just now, only these two women stepped forward. Although they didn't do much, at least they did want to help him. Now that these two women had fainted on the ground, if he didn't care about them on the battlefield of millions of soldiers, they might not even know how they died. After a brief examination, he found that Boya's injuries were more serious. The arrow she shot had been deflected by Yu Sang. Not only did it not hurt the enemy, but it also hurt herself. Half of her shoulder was almost broken, and blood kept flowing. On the contrary, Li Shiqing's situation was a little surprising. Yang Kai thought that Li Shiqing's injuries were more serious. After all, she was injured by Yu Sang's spiritual power. Even if she didn't die, she would be seriously injured. But after a careful examination, Yang Kai found that she was safe and sound. The reason she fainted was probably because her spiritual sense was shaken. Chapter 35-31. In this kind of situation, as long as she woke up naturally, everything would be fine. Yang Kai couldn't help but be startled. Recalling the scene just now, he vaguely felt that the reason Li Shiqing was safe and sound was related to the light emitted from her chest. As the disciple of the Flower Shadow Great Emperors, she must have carried a lot of life-saving treasures with her. Although everything had been taken away when she came to the demon territory, the things she refined in her body couldn't be taken away by others. But as a result, Yang Kai breathed a sigh of relief. If something really happened to Li Shiqing because of this, he really wouldn't be able to explain it to the great emperors of the Flower Shadow. Looking around, Yang Kai saw Xiao Wu looking at him with a panicked expression. He immediately called out, "Take care of them." Xiao Wu came back to her senses and nodded heavily. She quickly rushed over and picked up Boya and Li Shiqing, one in each hand, before quickly retreating to the back of their camp. Taking advantage of this gap, Yang Kai also stuffed a handful of spirit pills into Boya's mouth. Her injuries looked serious, but in fact, they didn't threaten her foundation. She only needed to rest for a few days to recover. Straightening up again, Yang Kai gloomily looked towards the blood mist. Space principles fluctuated and he disappeared. When he reappeared, he was above the blood mist that covered thousands of kilometers. Raising his hand, a cyan gourd appeared in his palm. It was the wind gourd he obtained from the depths of Orthodoxy Temple's forbidden area. Opening the gourd, Yang Kai madly poured his emperor qi into it and aimed it at the blood mist. In the next moment, the astral wind that swept across the world turned into wind blades that cut towards the blood mist. With a flash of black light, the embodiment that was connected to Yang Kai's mind had already escaped from the blood mist. The wind blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth continuously slashed into the blood mist, shattering a large area of the blood mist into pieces. Muffled groans could be heard from time to time. Clearly, Yu Sang had been hit. In less than 10 breaths of time, the blood mist started to roll and suddenly condensed towards the center, revealing Yu Sang's figure once again. Without stopping, he had already transformed into a bloody light and pounced in front of Yang Kai. When he raised his hand, his entire arm turned into a blood-red giant python with horns on its forehead. It opened its bloody mouth and bit down on Yang Kai, intending to swallow Yang Kai whole. The Dharmakaya had the cultivation of a half-saint, so Yu Sang couldn't do anything to it in a short period of time. That was why they were evenly matched. However, Yang Kai's strength was only that of a middle-ranked demon king. If Yu Sang couldn't even deal with such a guy, he wouldn't deserve to be a half-saint. The blood python arrived in the blink of an eye. Its huge mouth bit through space, and it didn't give Yang Kai any time to react before it swallowed the space he was in. When the huge mouth closed, Yang Kai had already disappeared. Yu Sang sneered, ignorant. If Yang Kai had hidden, he really wouldn't have been able to do anything. After all, he was proficient in space secret techniques and wouldn't be so easy to kill. However, he had jumped out himself. This was simply courting death, which was exactly what Yu Sang wanted. The blood-red giant python twisted, as if it was about to transform back. However, at this moment, Yu Sang's expression suddenly changed, and he looked towards the python's head. Inside there seemed to be an unimaginable aura awakening, causing people to involuntarily feel a sense of fear. At the same time, a low shout that sounded like a whisper entered their ears. Dragon form! The python's head suddenly swelled up, and a huge monster suddenly appeared in the python's mouth. The blood ball quickly grew bigger and moved forward, completely enveloping Yang Kai's half-dragon body. Yu Sang looked down and stretched out his hand to point at Yang Kai. He shouted in a low voice, "Die!" The loose blood ball suddenly shrank at this moment, and the thin blood ball walls sent out an amazing binding force. Immediately, a cracking sound came from Yang Kai's body. At this critical moment, the practicing body flew over and waved his war hammer, smashing towards Yu Sang's head. A trace of unwillingness flashed in Yusang's eyes, but he didn't want to face it head-on. After all, it was a divine weapon. Who knew what would happen if he was hit by it? He could only retreat. In the blood ball, Yang Kai struggled a few times, but he found that he couldn't break the layer of defense no matter how hard he tried. This thing seemed to be extremely tough, and it couldn't be solved by pure strength. Seeing that he was being tightened and was about to be out of breath, Yang Kai could only open his mouth. Accompanied by the sound of a dragon's roar, a raging flame came out of his mouth. Fire Dragon's breath. Under the raging flame, the blood ball quickly evaporated, freeing him at once. The practicing body had already chased after Yusang. Yang Kai didn't stop and followed closely behind. The two of them joined forces to fight against Yusang. In the fierce battle, Yang Kai could clearly feel the growth of himself and the practicing body. Last time in the Eastern Territory, he also used his full strength and joined forces with the practicing body to fight against Song Emo. Song Emo was a fake emperor, about the same level as Yusang. But at that time, the two of them used all their strength and could only barely protect themselves from Song Emo. In the end, Xiongqi appeared and forced Song Emo to retreat. But now, he could gain the upper hand in the battle against Yusang. Of course, the growth of the practicing body was the most important. Yang Kai wasn't much stronger than he was at that time. This made him feel resentful in his heart. Strength was indeed his biggest shortcoming. Although he was now a second-order Emperor Realm Master, and was already ahead of most people in both the Demon Domain and the Star Boundary, as his strength increased, the higher the level he came into contact with, the more powerless he felt. For example, although he could gain the upper hand by joining forces with the practicing body, it was impossible for him to kill Yusang unless he made a huge mistake. But instead of pinning his hopes on others' mistakes, it was better to focus on improving his own strength. He didn't need to improve too much. As long as he reached the third-order Emperor realm, the situation would be much better when he faced a half-saint in the future. High up in the sky, terrifying dragon race secret techniques bloomed in Yang Kai's hands, giving the practicing body as much space to fight as possible. The heaven-devouring Great Emperor's territory had quietly spread out, devouring Yusang's strength little by little without his knowledge. As long as there was enough time, the advantage on his side would become more and more obvious. When the time came, Yusang would die. This guy had deliberately schemed to deal with him, so how could Yang Kai let him off so easily? Now that he had found an opportunity, he naturally had to make him pay the price. Otherwise, he would always be watched by a half-saint in the future, and his life would be uncomfortable. However, things didn't go as he wished. While the battle was in full swing, Yusang suddenly retreated, turning into a blood-red light, and quickly escaping without stopping. Although the practicing body tried to stop him, it couldn't do anything when a half-saint wanted to escape. It swung its war hammer, but only hit empty air. Needless to say, Yang Kai's speed wasn't much slower than Yusang's teleportation. He could only watch as Yusang escaped and disappeared from his field of vision. Yang Kai looked in the direction where Yusang disappeared with a ferocious expression. He had nowhere to vent his anger, so he felt very uncomfortable. "Someone is coming," the practicing body suddenly said in a deep voice, and put away the demonic war hammer. Yang Kai turned his head and saw a streamer not far away. When the streamer came closer, he discovered that it was Baizhua. Baizhua looked at Yang Kai's huge figure in amazement. After carefully examining it for a long time, he vaguely recognized Yang Kai's appearance. He frowned and looked at the chaotic battlefield below, and said in a deep voice, "What's going on?" Chapter 35-32. He had also heard from his subordinates that there seemed to be some trouble here, so he hurried over to investigate. When Yang Kai left his place, he was heading back here, so he suspected that something had happened here. Now that he looked at it, it was indeed so. Moreover, judging from the remnant auras here, there should have been a great battle between half-saints. Baizhua couldn't help but take a few more glances at the embodiment. "Yusang is here." Yang Kai looked at him with a sullen face. "How is that possible?" Baizhua was shocked. "Did you see wrongly?" Yang Kai gritted his teeth and said, I'm not so bad as to mistake the person who wants to kill me. But shouldn't he be in the two realms? Baizhua frowned as he spoke, as if he had thought of something. He nodded slightly and said, if that's the case, it's not strange that he would come back. Yang Kai snorted coldly as he withdrew his dragon form and returned to his original appearance. This made Baizhua feel a little embarrassed. After all, more than 2 hours ago, he had told Yang Kai that Yu Sang stayed behind to guard the two realms battlefield. Who knew that Yang Kai would be attacked by Yu Sang as soon as he returned from his place? Fortunately, nothing happened. If something had happened, he would have to bear some responsibility. He couldn't help but laugh and ask, you're not hurt, right? Yang Kai also knew that he couldn't be blamed for this. The reason why his expression was a little ugly wasn't because Baijua's information was wrong and put him in a passive position, but because this guy came too quickly. The reason why Yu Sang decisively retreated was probably because he sensed Baijua's aura. He probably also knew that once Baizhua came, he definitely wouldn't stand on his side. The two of them already had a grudge, and now he had sneaked back into the demon territory. If Baizhua caught him, he wouldn't let him off so easily. When Baizhua and Yang Kai's embodiment joined forces, he wouldn't be able to escape easily. Yang Kai said in a muffled voice, it's nothing serious. Baizhua nodded gently. The Lord will arrive in half a day. Let's clean up here first. Although Yu Sang had already retreated, millions of people were still fighting in the demon race below. If no one intervened, it wouldn't be resolved in a short time. If Yu Meng really came and saw this, it wouldn't look good for anyone. This was already considered an internal conflict, and it would only make the other demon saint laugh at Yu Meng for being incompetent. Yang Kai wanted to kill all of the succubus demon's subordinates, but he knew that since Baizhua had shown up, that idea was somewhat unrealistic. Moreover, he had suffered many casualties on his side. In just a short while, nearly 1/10 of the 2 million troops had died. Anyway, the monk could run away, but the temple couldn't run away. Whether it was Yu Sang, Di Li, or the succubus demon, Yang Kai had already nailed them on his list of enemies. As long as they were still working under Yu Meng, sooner or later, he would get back at them. Without saying a word, he rushed down with his Dharmakaya, killing in and out of the enemy's army several times. He directly disintegrated the enemy's fighting spirit and made the enemy's army collapse. Only then did he stop. After that, Lao Ku and the others counted the battlefield, so there was no need for Yang Kai to worry about anything. Baizhua followed closely beside Yang Kai, probably because he was afraid that Yu Sang would come back and attack. Not long after the battle here, Wind-chasing wolf ran back proudly and shamelessly came to Yang Kai's side, looking like he was asking for credit. Yang Kai gave it a beating, scolding it as he hit it. Did I ask you to chase after them? Who asked you to chase after them? You should change your name to Chasing People, not Wind-chasing Wolf. If Wind-chasing Wolf hadn't been distracted by the female succubus demon, maybe Yu Sang would have been killed today. Wind-chasing Wolf looked wronged and didn't know what was going on at all. Baizhua looked at it with fear. He had heard of Wind-chasing Wolf's name. As the mount of the master of the 100-spirit continent, this guy had always been known for his bad temper, and his strength was very terrifying. Seeing Yang Kai scolding him, he was really afraid that Wind-chasing Wolf would beat Yang Kai to death in anger. What surprised him even more was that Wind-chasing Wolf didn't fight back, nor did it talk back. It just whimpered from time to time to express its grievance. After being beaten, it lowered its head and ran to the side to climb down, looking very hurt. Baizhua clicked his tongue in wonder. Boya and Li Shiqing had both woken up. The latter didn't have any serious injuries. Seeing Yang Kai safe and sound and smiling at him, Yang Kai felt warm in his heart. They were both from the astral world, so there was a natural closeness. If it wasn't for the disguise, Yang Kai's attitude towards her wouldn't have been so bad. However, they were in the demon territory, so they had to be careful. Li Shiqing's face was pale, but after taking the pill, her injuries improved, and there wouldn't be any sequelae. Yang Kai gave them a few words of encouragement, and asked Xiao Wu to take good care of them. Then he looked into the distance with Baizhua. Compared to the battle between the great emperors and the demon saint, the previous conflict here could only be said to be a small fight. The buzzing sound in the sky didn't stop for a moment, and in a very distant location, a burst of light would burst out from time to time, making the world lose its color and the void tremble. No matter who it was, as long as one's strength reached a certain level, they would be able to feel that the laws of this world were beginning to shatter. This was the power of the great emperors and the demon saint. Their every move could really affect the survival of a continent. Most of the half-saint have returned to the demon territory. So what about the two-realm battlefield? Yang Kai suddenly asked. Baizhua shrugged and said, "They're like turtles. What else can they do?" Yang Kai turned his head to look at him and said with a chuckle, "Are the Saint Venerables planning to exhaust one of the great emperors to death with numbers?" Since most of the half-saint had been summoned back and gathered in the Eternal Heaven continent, it could only mean that these half-saint would have to face Mingyu in the end. One or two half-saint might not be of much use in front of Mingyu, but as long as there were enough people, they would be able to kill an elephant with numbers. Baizhua frowned and muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "Although you can say that, the matter isn't as simple as you think. The Saint Venerables have a more far-reaching plan. Moreover, the matter here is not only a life and death gamble for all the half-saint, but also a great opportunity." "Oh." Yang Kai raised his eyebrows. "I'd like to hear the details." Baizhua smiled bitterly and shook his head. "You should ask the Saint Venerables about this matter. If she's willing to tell you, then she'll explain it to you clearly. If she's unwilling, then it's not good for me to exceed my authority." Yang Kai's eyes flashed, but he didn't ask any more questions. Since Baizhua had already expressed his attitude, he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. He could understand the life and death gamble. A half-saint facing off against the great emperors was naturally a huge gamble. Maybe they would be killed in a single exchange. But what was this great opportunity? Could it be that killing Mingyu would give them some benefits? The information Baizhua revealed made him unable to ignore it even if he didn't want to. The battlefield hadn't been cleaned up yet, but a terrifying aura had already rushed over from the distance. Zhui Feng, who had been crawling on the ground, immediately got up and looked in that direction with vigilance. He obviously felt the pressure, but he quickly crawled back down. Yang Kai and Baizhua also looked up at the same time. The latter's expression shook. The Saint Venerables have arrived. Without needing him to say anything, Yang Kai also felt Yu Rumeng's aura. Sure enough, a moment later, there was a flash of light, and Yu Rumeng's figure appeared in front of them. "Greetings, Saint Venerables." Baizhua quickly cupped his hands, and the army behind him fell to their knees. Yu Rumeng nodded slightly and glanced around. She couldn't help but frown. What's going on? The smell of blood in this valley was overwhelming. Broken limbs and wreckage could be seen everywhere. It was obvious that there had been a great battle. Even Yang Kai's face was a little pale, as if he had been injured. This scene startled Yu Rumeng. She thought that the aftermath of the battle between Mingyu and Mingyu had blown over here. Baizhua turned his head and glanced at Yang Kai. Seeing that he didn't intend to speak, he sighed in his heart. He could only step forward and tell him the information he had just received from Yang Kai. Hearing that Yu Sang had actually returned from the two-realm battlefield and even attacked Yang Kai here, Yu Rumeng's face turned white with anger. She gritted her teeth and shouted, "Impudent!" She turned to Baizhua and said, "Summon Yu Sang to see this saint." Not only did he return from the two-realm battlefield without orders, but he actually dared to attack Yang Kai here. How could Yu Rumeng tolerate him? Not to mention that she and Yang Kai were restricted by the Heart Seal secret technique. Yang Kai himself was now the key to the stability of the entire demon territory. Without him, who would protect those unstable realm gates? Who would repair those disappeared realm gates? Whether it was for public or private reasons, Yu Rumeng had to give Yang Kai a reasonable explanation. Baizhua immediately walked to the side and took out an item. He was probably thinking of a way to contact Yu Sang. Yu Rumeng turned to look at Yang Kai again, and her expression became gentle. "Are you okay? Is what Baizhua said true?" Yang Kai shook his head. "I'm fine. It's just that brother Baizhua only knows a part of it." Yu Rumeng said. "What else doesn't he know?" Yang Kai lightly sneered. "I have Zhui Feng to protect me, so Yu Sang alone can't do anything to me. However, He obviously knows this, so someone helped him draw Zhui Feng away. Who? Yu Rumeng's pretty face sank. Someone who could draw Zhui Feng away was undoubtedly a half-saint. She really didn't expect that the half-saint subordinates under her would be so ignorant and cause trouble for her at this critical moment. I don't know, it's a female succubus demon, Yang Kai replied. Although he didn't know her, there were only a few half-saint subordinates under Yu Rumeng. Coupled with her background as a succubus demon, it should be easy to find out her identity. Apart from that, Dilly should have played a part in this as well. There's also Dilly. Yu Rumeng couldn't help but frown. However, when she thought about how the relationship between Dilly and Yu Sang seemed to be very good, she felt relieved. Previously, when she appointed Yang Kai as her king to guard the Cloud Shadow continent, many of the half-saints under her had disagreed. After all, in the demon domain, only half-saints were qualified to rule over a continent. How could a brat from the human race, who had just arrived, be on equal footing with them? Chapter 35-33. Among these half-saint, Dilly's opposition was the loudest, but at that time, she had forcibly suppressed it, so Yang Kai didn't know about it. She didn't expect that Dilly's shadow would also be involved in this matter. This time, 3 of her half-saint subordinates were involved. Yu Rumeng couldn't help but feel a little headache. If it was only Yu Sang, it would be easy to deal with. She could just punish him as an example to others. However, 3 half-saint subordinates were a little too much. If she really punished those 3, it might cause dissatisfaction among the other half-saint subordinates. Although a demon saint was a top existence in the territory of demons, the number of half-saint subordinates under their control was also the foundation of their strength. Otherwise, if a demon saint only had cultivation and no one to do things for him, it would be meaningless. While they were talking, Baizhua came back with a gloomy face. He cupped his hands and said, "Holy sage, there is no reply from Yu Sang." "Is there no reply or no response?" Yu Rumeng turned her head and looked at him. Baizhua said, "It should be no response. He's rebelling." Yu Rumeng was furious. Today's matter was completely caused by Yu Sang. Di Li and the female succubus demon should only be helping Yu Sang. But now they couldn't get in touch with him. Continue to send messages. Tell him that if he doesn't appear in front of this holy sage within 2 hours, he will never appear again. Baizhua was startled when he heard this. It seemed that he didn't expect Yu Rumeng's punishment to be so serious. However, he quickly cupped his hands and left, giving an ultimatum to Yu Sang. Yu Rumeng was angry for a while, but then she comforted Yang Kai and said, "Don't worry, I will give you an explanation for this matter." Yang Kai slowly shook his head. "No need, I will deal with my own matters." Yu Rumeng frowned, glanced at the embodiment standing on the side, and gently nodded. "Up to you. But wait until the matter here is over. The matter here is more important." She was also relieved. Although she was willing to give Yang Kai an explanation, if she personally came forward, not to mention Yu Sang, Di Li and the female succubus demon would definitely not be able to resist. If the news spread, it was very likely that they would side with the other half-saint. But if Yang Kai did it himself, the embodiment, she could see that the embodiment was a half-saint's cultivation. But Di Li and the female succubus demon were not to be trifled. So even if Yang Kai, the female succubus demon, and the female succubus demon were not easy to provoke, it wasn't that the half-saint under her didn't have any conflicts. For example, Yu Sang and Baizhua had always had grievances with each other. This was also a well-known fact, but as long as it didn't affect the overall interests of her side, she wouldn't easily intervene. In the past, she didn't intervene in the conflicts of her subordinates. Naturally, it was best not to intervene now. Otherwise, if she made a mistake, she wouldn't be able to treat them equally in the future. "I heard that you were injured." Yang Kai turned his head and looked at her. Yu Rumeng didn't want to say more about this matter, so she casually replied, "It's just a small injury, nothing serious." "But you, why are you here? Shouldn't you be in the 100-spirit continent?" "I heard that something happened here, so I came to join in the fun." Yang Kai grinned. But I didn't expect that the great emperors of the Bright Moon Empire would actually be here. He has been here all along. Since you have trapped him here, why haven't you killed him? Yu Rumeng slowly shook her head and said, "It's not as simple as you think. If you only wanted to kill him, he would have died. Of course, there are other reasons for keeping him alive, but what?" Yu Rumeng sighed. "It's just that no one expected that he could actually recover to his peak state in this situation. So the situation has changed." Yang Kai frowned and said, "Just now, Brother Baizhua said that this matter is not only a life and death gamble for all the half-saint, but also a great opportunity. What's going on?" Hearing this, Yu Rumeng turned her head and glanced at Baizhua, as if blaming him for talking too much. Yang Kai shrugged and said, "If it's not convenient to say, then don't say it. Anyway, I just came to join in the fun. It's not bad to be able to witness the fall of a great emperors. By the way, does the Bright Moon Empire still have a chance to survive this time?" Yu Rumeng chuckled. "Your resentment towards the star boundary is still so deep." Yang Kai coldly snorted. "If it weren't for them being so aggressive, how could I have fallen into such a situation?" Yu Rumeng squinted at him. "What's wrong with being in the territory of the demon realm? I see that you've been living quite well recently. There's nothing bad about it. It's just that I'm a human after all, so I feel a little out of place here." Yang Kai chuckled and changed the topic. "You haven't answered me yet. How much chance does the Bright Moon Empire have this time?" Yu Rumeng looked at him with a smile. "The 12 demon saint in the demon territory have all appeared. So how much chance do you think he has?" Yang Kai couldn't help but whistle when he heard this. It seems that he's dead for sure. At this moment, Li Shiqing suddenly rushed over from not far away, grabbed Yang Kai's arm with a pale face, and looked at him anxiously. "Save Master Bright Moon." She had been meditating not far away to recover, so obviously, she had also heard the conversation between Yang Kai and Yu Rumeng, so she acted like this. Yu Rumeng looked at her, and then looked at Yang Kai, a playful smile appearing at the corner of her mouth. "Looking at this face all day long, how do you feel?" Back in the star boundary, she had transformed into Li Shiqing and stayed by Yang Kai's side, and many things had happened between her and Yang Kai. Later, when they returned to the demon territory, she removed her disguise and restored her original appearance. "How can I feel?" Yang Kai coldly snorted. "You are you, and she is she. How can you confuse the two of you?" While speaking, he flung Li Shiqing away and coldly said, "Get back." Li Shiqing was unwilling to let him go and pounced on him again, grabbing his arm, her beautiful eyes full of begging. "Bright Moon Master is the great emperors of the star boundary. Nothing can happen to him. Can you think of a way to save him? Don't you have the Space Divine technique? You can take Bright Moon Master away from here. I'll say it one more time, get back." Yang Kai's face was cold. He was already upset because of Yu Rumeng's words. And now Li Shiqing came to find trouble. So how could he be in the mood to serve her? If the Space Divine technique was really so powerful, he wouldn't be here staring helplessly. When dealing with those half-saint, the Space Divine technique might have some unexpected effects. But when facing the 12 demon saint in the demon territory, how much use could the Space Divine technique have? Not to mention anything else. Once Yang Kai made a move, the demon saint only needed to seal off the Eternal Heaven continent, and they would be able to catch a turtle in a jar. He wanted to save Bright Moon, but it wasn't like this. Seeing that Li Shiqing was still chattering, Kai Yang reached out and slapped her on the head, knocking her unconscious. He then signaled Yin with his eyes, and Yin immediately stepped forward to help Li Shiqing down. "How could you do that?" Yu Rumeng glanced at Yang Kai. "You didn't do it on purpose for me to see, did you?" Yang Kai chuckled. "What's there to do about it?" As he spoke, he reached out and lifted Yu Rumeng's chin. Yu Rumeng's expression changed, and she said while gnashing her teeth, "There are so many people here, leave me some face." Yang Kai chuckled and stroked her hair. Yu Rumeng was helpless. She glanced around, and saw Baizhua looking up at the sky. She couldn't help but feel angry and amused, so she changed the topic. "What's the situation with Yuesang?" Baizhua quickly cupped his hands. "There's still no reaction." "Well, It seems that he's really going to rebel. Yu Rumeng was so angry that she laughed. I'd like to see how he wants to die. Baizhua said. Holy Senior, do you need me to go and capture him? Baizhua didn't want to miss this opportunity to beat the dog when it was down, so he was eager to try. Yu Rumeng waved her hand and said, No need, deal with the matter here first. We'll talk about it after we understand the matter here. Yes, you should go back too. Things may change at any time. Pass down the order, and let everyone be prepared. Baizhua took the order and left, disappearing soon. After he left, Yang Kai asked with a suspicious look, What do I need to prepare? Do I need to prepare anything here? Yu Rumeng looked up at him, hesitation flashing in her eyes. After a long time she sighed. You shouldn't have come here. The reason why I didn't tell you to come here is because this place is too dangerous. Yang Kai shrugged. But I'm already here. Yu Rumeng smiled bitterly. I'm afraid it's impossible for you to leave now, right? Yang Kai grinned and said, If you knock me out and let someone take me away, there's nothing I can do. He was really afraid that Yu Rumeng would do that. Although he didn't know why Yu Rumeng wanted him to leave, it was best to say it first and block her. Can't you just do it for me? I brought you here from the star boundary, so I don't want you to die here. Yang Kai pondered for a moment and said, I'll be careful. I knew it. Yu Rumeng brushed her hair behind her ear and looked at the battlefield in the distance. After a while she said, Baizhua is right. The matter here is not only a life and death gamble for all the half-saint, but also a great opportunity because the final kill will be carried out by them. Yang Kai's mind shook violently, and his expression changed. Although Yu Rumeng only said that it would happen and didn't say that it would happen, since a demon saint said this, it was very likely that it would happen. Forcibly suppressing the shock in his heart, Yang Kai tried to calm his tone. It's not difficult to understand the life and death gamble. Half-saint killing a great emperor does indeed need to disregard life and death. But what about the opportunity? Could it be that there are benefits for them to kill Bright Moon? This was also what he didn't understand the most. What benefits could killing a great emperor bring? Perhaps it was because his current realm wasn't high enough that he couldn't figure this out. Yu Rumeng said softly. At that time we didn't kill Bright Moon, but used a large array and blood sacrifice to trap him here. Originally, we planned to let Bright Moon slowly weaken and fall here. Bright Moon is one of the great emperors of the star boundary. His existence represents a part of the will of the star boundary. If he falls here, that part of the will of the star boundary will be accepted and assimilated by the demon territory, which will bring unimaginable benefits to the demon territory. Chapter 35-34. This was in line with what Mingyu had said before. Mingyu had also said that the reason why the demon saint didn't kill him was because he was afraid that he would fight like a cornered beast and risk his life to drag others down with him. The second reason was to let the demon territory digest him. At that time, the capacity of the worldly bottle in the demon territory would definitely increase, and there would be an extra demon saint, while the astral boundary would permanently lose one. This would have a great impact on the situation between the two worlds. What's more, the high-end fighting strength of the astral boundary was weaker than that of the demon territory. Whether it was the great emperors or the false emperors, they were inferior in number to the demon saint and half-saint here. The biggest advantage the astral boundary had now was the home field advantage. Yu Rumeng continued. Now that Mingyu has used some unknown method to recover, and has broken the blood sacrifice technique and the 12 great demon arrays, it is impossible to trap him to death, so the original plan has to be changed. The 12 of us will attack together to cripple him, and then the half-saint will kill him, and whoever can kill Mingyu will have the opportunity to snatch a part of the will of the great world that belongs to him. Yang Kai's eyes narrowed when he heard this. There is such a thing? Yu Rumeng said indifferently. You are not strong enough now, so it is normal that you don't understand these things. But it is also because of this that the person who kills him in the end must be a half-saint. In this way, the one who accepts a part of the will of the great world will have a high chance of growing into a new demon saint. Although it was more convenient for the demon saint to kill Mingyu, even if he accepted the will of the great world, it would not be of much use to the demon saint. It was far better to create the birth of the 13th demon saint. It turned out that the so-called great opportunity was such a situation. Yang Kai's mind was in a trance. According to Yu Rumeng, Mingyu was definitely doomed this time. How could he help Mingyu? In fact, it is best for you to kill Mingyu. Yu Rumeng suddenly looked at him with a complicated expression. What do you mean? Yang Kai forced himself to calm down, so that Yu Rumeng wouldn't notice anything amiss. Yu Rumeng smiled and said, "The great world is different from the great world. It is extremely difficult for the astral world's will to be accepted by the demon race. Even if a half-saint were to kill Bright Moon and steal her will, they would still explode and die from the backlash. But you are different. You were born in the astral world, so compared to the demon race, it is easier for you to accept that will and obtain its acknowledgement." Yang Kai's eyes lit up. I can try. If he could openly approach Mingyu, he might have a chance to leave with her. You can't. Yu Rumeng's expression changed as she shouted. You can't have that kind of thought. Why? Yang Kai frowned. It's too dangerous. I'll be careful. Yu Rumeng stared at him. Don't force me to knock you out. I definitely won't let you take such a risk. Helpless, Kai Yang could only nod his head and say, All right, since you've said so, then I'll stand here and watch the fun. After pausing for a moment, he smiled bitterly. But then again, there's nothing fun to watch here. The battlefield was too far away. Although he could feel the earth-shaking movements there, Yang Kai couldn't see what was going on with his current eyesight, making him feel very helpless. Yu Rumeng thought about it and said softly, It's not impossible if you want to watch, but you can only watch from here, and don't think about anything else. I know. Yang Kai looked at her with some excitement. Although he didn't know what she was going to do, since she said so, he would definitely be able to understand. Yu Rumeng shook her head helplessly. With a flip of her hand, she took out a mirror-like demonic artifact. As her demonic chi surged, the mirror expanded and turned into the size of a table in front of Yang Kai. As the pitch-black demonic chi surged, the surface of the mirror rippled like a calm lake. As the ripples spread, some scenes gradually appeared on the surface of the mirror. They weren't very clear, but they weren't very blurry either. Kai Yang stuck his head out to take a look, then turned his head to look at his surroundings. Surprised, he asked, Is this mirror reflecting your vision? The scene that appeared in the mirror at this moment was clearly the valley, and it didn't stay the same. As Yu Rumeng's line of sight shifted, the scene on the mirror was constantly changing. Yu Rumeng nodded gently. Yes. Good thing. Yang Kai couldn't help but praise. The function of this demonic mirror didn't seem to be very useful, but it was exactly what he needed at this moment. Yu Rumeng couldn't stand here and accompany him all the time. When the time came, she would definitely go to the battlefield herself. At that time, he would be able to see the situation at a glance. Remember what you promised me. Yu Rumeng didn't go to the battlefield immediately. Instead, she found a place to meditate. On the surface, there was no trace of injury on her, but Yang Kai reckoned that she was still injured. Otherwise, she wouldn't be in such a hurry to recuperate. Furthermore, it was definitely not easy for a devil saint to recover from his injuries. Since she didn't go to the battlefield, Yang Kai naturally couldn't see the situation over there. Even though he was anxious, he could only wait patiently. During this time, he also racked his brains to see if he could find a way to get Mingyu out of this predicament. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't find a clue unless he could persuade Yu Rumeng to help. But even with Yu Rumeng's help, the chances weren't very high. As time passed, the situation over there became more and more intense. It seemed that other demon saint had rushed over. Mingyu was already fighting 1 against 2, and now that the number of enemies had increased, the situation was likely to become even worse. At the same time, the laws of heaven and earth of the entire eternal heaven continent became more and more broken. The aftermath of the attacks spread over, causing many members of the demon race to be on tenterhooks. They were afraid that this continent would be shattered, and everyone would be swallowed into the void. At a certain moment, Yu Rumeng suddenly opened her eyes. Her deep gaze looked into the distance, and then she stood up. Yang Kai turned his head to look at her. He saw Yu Rumeng's figure flicker and disappear from where she was, leaving behind a wisp of fragrance. Seeing this, Yang Kai hurriedly rushed to the front of the demonic mirror. He clasped his hands on the edge of the demonic crystal and looked down nervously. The scene in the demonic mirror changed rapidly. Obviously, Yu Rumeng was hurrying over. After about 30 breaths of time, a dazzling light bloomed in the demonic mirror, followed by a loud rumbling sound. Yang Kai was startled. He didn't expect that this demonic mirror could transmit not only images, but also sound. However, this was a good thing for Yang Kai. It would be easier for him to understand the situation over there. The scene paused. It should be Yu Rumeng who stopped. When the dazzling light faded, 7 or 8 figures stood proudly in the void. One person stood in the middle, while the others surrounded him. The person in the middle was bathed in blood. His white clothes were dyed red, and it was unknown whether it was his blood or the enemy's. Although he looked a little tired, he was still as calm as the wind. Yang Kai's eyes narrowed. Mingyu's current situation wasn't optimistic. Although he had recovered with the help of the leaf of the immortal tree he had given him, he was injured again after such a big battle. Although the Blood Sea and the Great Formation were no longer binding them, the 12 demon saints were still gathered in the eternal heaven realm. Mingyu wanted to escape from this place, as difficult as ascending to the heavens. There were tall and short devil saints, male and female, and all of them represented the pinnacle of the devil domain. Some had gloomy eyes, some had smiles on their faces, and some had calm expressions on their faces. There were many different expressions on their faces. Yang Kai didn't know many of them. He had dealt with Bai Liemo before, so they weren't strangers. He had also seen Xueli from afar. He was from the Blood Demon clan, and he was the one who presided over the blood sacrifice art. No one could compare to him. However, Xueli's current situation wasn't much better than Mingyu's. He was also covered in wounds. It seemed that he had suffered a lot at Mingyu's hands. Besides him, there was also a fat, short, and completely red demon saint that Yang Kai was extremely concerned about. If he wasn't wrong, this guy should be a red demon. Red demons could give birth to a demon saint. Weren't they the lowest level race in the devil territory? Besides self-destructing, what other methods did they have? However, this red devil saint was the same as Xueli. Both of them were heavily injured, especially since there was a ball of gentle light constantly emitting from his chest and abdomen, causing him some degree of interference and damage at every moment. This was clearly Mingyu's method. Boa's weak voice suddenly came from beside him. This should be the Red Demon Clan's master Huobu. Yang Kai turned his head and saw that Yin, Lao Ku, and the others had also gathered around. They were obviously very concerned about the battle, but they didn't dare to get too close without Yang Kai's permission. Boa was the only one who didn't treat herself as an outsider. She stood beside Yang Kai and watched with him. So he was Huobu. Previously, when Yang Kai went to Baijua's side, he heard from Baijua that Mingyu was fighting with Xueli and Huobu. He secretly remembered these two names. Now, it seemed that none of the three who started the battle had gained an advantage. The other demon saint who came later were fine, at least on the surface. However, the other demon saint's soul fragments had been destroyed, so they would definitely be injured to a certain extent. Didn't I tell you to rest? Yang Kai frowned and glanced at the injury on Boa's shoulder. Boa shook her head. It's not a big deal. Moreover, I really don't want to miss such a rare battle. No one wanted to miss it. From the expressions of Lao Ku, Carson, and the others, it was clear that they thought the same. Yang Kai let them be. Chapter 35-35. There were all kinds of strange things in the boundless universe. And there were always some unimaginable things in this world that people couldn't understand. Yang Kai's eyes turned slightly as he pointed at another demon saint and asked, "What about this one?" Although he was only observing the situation through a mirror, this demon saint was still the most eye-catching existence. It wasn't because his appearance was special, but because he gave off a feeling that he couldn't be ignored. Yang Kai felt that this guy wasn't someone to be trifled with. Boya's expression was also extremely solemn. She carefully identified him and said, "If I'm not mistaken, this should be the first demon saint, Master Wilderness." The first demon saint? Yang Kai was surprised. The 12 demon saint are actually ranked differently. He had been in the demon territory for quite some time, but he had never heard of such a thing. He wondered what Yu Rumeng's ranking was, and what Bailey Mo's ranking was. Boya laughed and shook her head. The other demon saint aren't ranked differently, but Master Wilderness is publicly recognized as the first demon saint. He's the strongest? Yang Kai asked seriously. He's also the oldest demon saint. Boya nodded slightly. Yang Kai carefully observed this guy, memorizing his appearance, and asked, "Which demon race is he from?" "Power demon." Yang Kai secretly gritted his teeth. The demon race of power demons was known for their strength, and this guy was both the strongest and the oldest. His strength had probably reached an unimaginable level, and no one in the astral boundary could contend against him. Under Boya's guidance, Yang Kai recognized the demon saint one by one. Speaking of which, Boya had never seen these demon saints before. However, the characteristics of their races were too obvious. Many of the famous demon saint names were widely spread in the demon territory. Boya only needed to identify them based on their characteristics. Flame demon Qi Yen, feather demon Fu Yu, stone demon Emokan, shadow demon Wu Hua, corpse demon Zhu Qi, bone demon Gamen, sand demon Yu Qiu. In addition to the succubus demon Yu Rumeng, snow demon Bailey Mo, red demon Huabu, and blood demon Shueli, as well as the power demon Huang Wuji. These were the 12 demon saint that stood at the peak of the demon territory. All of them were here, and the races behind these 12 demon saint, other than the fire demon clan, were also the strongest races in the demon territory. Staring at the scene in the mirror, Yang Kai held his breath. It was like the calm before the storm. On the battlefield far away, Bright Moon was facing off against the 12 demon saint, both in the light and in the dark. His expression was indifferent, and the other demon saint did not seem to have any intention of making the first move. Although they had the absolute advantage in terms of numbers, and were confident in keeping Bright Moon here forever. If Bright Moon fought with all his might, he might have a chance to heavily injure one or two of them. If they were not careful, they might even die together with him. Therefore, even though the demon saint had the advantage, none of them made the first move. Moreover, they did not plan to kill Bright Moon here. Instead, they wanted to exhaust his strength as much as possible, and create an opportunity for the half-saint behind to kill him. The world was silent, and even the sound of breathing could not be detected. This kind of confrontation lasted for several days and nights. The figures of the great emperors and the demon saint were like an eternal picture scroll between heaven and earth. They did not move at all, which made Yang Kai feel anxious. Although he was not on the battlefield, Yang Kai knew that the longer this battle dragged on, the smaller Ming Yu's chances of escaping would become. Although they had been confronting each other for several days, Ming Yu had not been able to recover at all. The auras of the 12 demon saints were definitely locked onto him, and as long as he showed the slightest flaw, he would immediately be greeted with a storm of attacks. He had to maintain a high level of concentration at all times to cope with such a predicament, and under such circumstances his essence, qi, and soul were constantly being consumed. So how could he possibly recover? Even Yang Kai, a bystander, understood this obvious truth. So how could Bright Moon, who was in the center of the vortex, not know? In order to break out of this situation, Bright Moon had to take a risk. Only then would he have a chance at survival. If this confrontation continued, his situation would only become worse and worse. At a certain moment, Bright Moon suddenly moved. He slowly raised a hand and placed it in front of his chest. He formed a hand seal, and his body was immediately covered in a layer of gentle light. The moment he moved, the expressions of the demon saint all changed, and the demonic qi in their bodies soared into the sky. On the surface of the demon mirror, Shueli's figure blurred and turned into a bloody light that shot towards Bright Moon. The bloody light arrived in the blink of an eye, suddenly turning into a bloody net that seemed to be able to corrode all things, and enveloped Bright Moon. Bright Moon's other hand clenched in the air, and a long sword that seemed to be condensed from moonlight appeared in his hand. He did not even look as he slashed with the sword. The bloody net split into two and swept past Bright Moon, reforming into Xue Li's figure. He opened his mouth and spat out a cloud of bloody mist at Bright Moon. Bright Moon had no time to care about anything else. A full moon suddenly appeared behind him, hanging above his head. The moonlight shone, and the bloody mist quickly evaporated. At the same time, he drew his sword like a dragon, and the moonlight longsword turned into a rain of swords that covered the area in front of him. Small dark red balls flew in front of him. Huobo had taken advantage of Xue Li's entanglement to launch a sneak attack. Yang Kai could clearly see that the small dark red balls were shot out by Huobo from afar at an extremely fast speed. The net of swords collided with the small dark red balls, and a loud rumbling sound immediately rang out. The small balls exploded, as if the red demons had self-destructed. The light that soared into the sky enveloped Bright Moon's figure. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, 3 rays of light formed the shape of the Chinese character, and shot over from afar. It was the feathered demon Hibiscus, using its supreme archery. Another incomparably tall skeletal demon, with withered bones approached from below. As it approached, its teeth opened and closed, emitting a bone-chilling sound that caused one's hair to stand on end. A sandstorm rose up, and the shadow demon had already concealed itself. The stone demon's body glowed with a stony luster, and it took the lead to charge at the very front. It used its powerful defense as a meat shield to block Bright Moon's boundless moonlight. The cold wind whistled, and snowflakes danced in the air. Each snowflake was like a sharp blade, and under the ravaging wind, a wave of snowflakes and sharp blades were swept up. On the other side, flames soared into the sky and illuminated the world. The Balrog Qi Yan's body burned with raging flames, as if it wanted to incinerate the world. Murmurs that sounded like sleep talk rang out, shaking one's mind. The scene on the demonic treasure mirror rapidly changed. Pull one hair, and the whole body would be affected. With Bright Moon's move, the 12 devil saints attacked together. In an instant, a fierce battle broke out on the distant battlefield. The scene on the demonic treasure mirror swayed violently, and all kinds of light filled it. Deafening bursts rang out one after another, one after another. Yang Kai could no longer see the situation on the other side. His hands were tightly clasped on the edge of the demonic treasure mirror, and his expression was somewhat frighteningly grave. Boya curiously turned her head to look at him. After thinking for a while, she comforted him. The 12 master are all over there. The sacred senior will definitely be fine. Your Majesty doesn't need to be too worried. Yang Kai remained silent. He wasn't worried about Yu Meng, but Bright Moon. The demon saint was able to seriously injure Bright Moon and trap her in the eternal heaven continent. Naturally, they could do the same now. Moreover, compared to that day, the demon saint's lineup was even stronger today. Bright Moon's situation was really worrying. The battle showed no signs of stopping from the beginning. Whether it was Bright Moon or the mini demon saint, they all seemed to want to determine who was the superior one here. Occasionally, when the scene on the demonic treasure mirror stabilized, Yang Kai could vaguely see the situation. Without exception, it was Bright Moon being besieged. Her situation was getting more and more serious each time. It was already very rare for her to be able to fight against so many alone. However, even if she fought with her life on the line, how much chance of survival would she have? Yang Kai didn't know what Bright Moon was planning, but since things had already gotten to this point, his chances of escaping from the demon territory were very slim. Yang Kai estimated his own strength over and over again, thinking about what he could do to help if he rushed forward. However, what made him feel disheartened was that even if he used all his trump cards, he still wouldn't be able to get close to the other side of the battlefield. His nails had already dug into his flesh, and golden blood had dyed the edge of the demonic treasure mirror red. His face was so ferocious that it looked like he wanted to eat someone. Boya and the others also felt Yang Kai's bad mood. Silence was golden, and no one dared to disturb him. Time slowly passed. Using the occasional break in Yu Meng's attacks, Yang Kai could see a little bit of the situation on the other side of the battlefield through the demonic treasure mirror. Bright Moon was already covered in blood and wounds. Her face was also as pale as paper. Even if Yang Kai didn't personally witness the power of the divine technique she used, he could feel that it was much weaker than before. On the other hand, the demon saint was dealing with it more and more easily. The 12 demon saints' innate divine technique were all different, and they complemented each other well. At every moment, there would be 2 or 3 demon saints surrounding Bright Moon to interfere with her. Then, the demon saints who were proficient in long-range attacks would attack and heavily injure her, causing her blood to spray across the sky. There was also the shadow demon Saint Wuxia who appeared and disappeared like a ghost. Every time Bright Moon was caught off guard, he would appear and leave wounds on her body. The full moon hanging behind Bright Moon's head was already turbid and yellow, and could no longer release its previous brilliance. The heavens and earth collapsed, and huge cracks appeared in the void, as if the heavens and earth were tearing open a big mouth, mocking the incompetence of ants. After an unknown period of time, amidst the chaotic battlefield, Mingyu suddenly chuckled softly. Her soft voice spread out in all directions. Mingyu is honored to receive such high regard from all the saint venerables. Even if I die here, I will have no regrets. However, my life is not something that you can take as you wish. As soon as she finished speaking, a mass of light suddenly filled the heavens and earth, causing the demonic treasure mirror's surface to become blazing white. Then, a sensational aura spread from a very distant place and swept in all directions. Yang Kai suddenly raised his head and looked in that direction, his face pale, and his figure on the verge of collapse. Was Bright Moon forced into a corner and decided to self-destruct? Great emperors, unless they were really forced, would never choose such a decisive way to end their lives. At this moment, Yang Kai felt as if someone had grabbed his heart, making it so stifling that he almost couldn't breathe. Under the shock, blood flowed out from the corner of Mingyu's mouth. Although he had paid a huge price, as long as he dispelled Fuyu's attack, Mingyu still had a high chance of escaping. The demon saint's encirclement had yet to close, and the blood demon closest to him was still 100 miles away. As long as he could rush to the nearest realm gate, he might be able to escape. A black shadow suddenly appeared behind Mingyu like a ghost, and a ray of dim light lightly slashed past. Yang Kai's eyes suddenly widened, and the blood in his body instantly turned bone-chillingly cold. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. On the surface of the magic mirror, Mingyu still maintained the posture of facing the great demon saints. Behind him, a black shadow stuck close to his side. No one knew when he appeared, as if he had always been there. Before the moonlight completely disappeared, blood had already sputtered from Mingyu's waist. The scene flowed again. Blood splattered, and Mingyu's entire body trembled as if he had been struck by lightning. Without thinking, he slapped his palm behind him. The ghost-like figure quickly retreated, avoiding this attack. He stood 100 feet away from Mingyu and looked forward with an indifferent gaze. He held a pitch-black dagger in his hand, and the blade of the dagger was already dyed red with blood. It was dazzling to the eye. The demon saint all stopped in their tracks, and they no longer had any intention of pursuing. They all looked at Mingyu with complicated gazes. There was no excitement from a successful attack, no enmity from an enemy, and even Xue Li and Huobu, who had been tangling with Mingyu all this time, were silent. After receiving this attack, Mingyu was almost cut in half. The demon saint no longer needed to attack, because even if they did not attack, Mingyu would not be able to escape. Not only did that attack almost cut Mingyu in half, it also cut off his hope of escaping. The next stage was prepared for the half-saint who wanted to fight for the opportunity. The demon saint had already agreed that unless they had no other choice, no one would interfere. In the end, whoever obtained the opportunity would depend on the methods of their respective half-saint subordinates. No flower. In front of the mirror, Yang Kai clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and growled. But soon, he discovered that the person who attacked Mingyu was not No Flower, because in Yu Rumeng's vision, the shadow demon Saint No Flower was clearly on the other side. If it was not No Flower, then who was it? The person who attacked was clearly also a shadow demon, and someone who dared to attack one of the great emperors at this time was definitely a demon saint. Otherwise, they would not have had the opportunity to succeed. Recalling the appearance of this strange figure, Yang Kai's mind flashed back to the moment when he was ambushed outside the Orthodoxy Palace. That scene was very similar to the one just now. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, a name jumped out. Night Shadow Great Emperor's Qin Yi. He was actually here. And from the looks of it, he had been lying in ambush in the Eternal Sky continent for a long time, just waiting for this crucial moment to deal a fatal blow to Mingyu. Yang Kai did not expect this, and Mingyu clearly did not expect this either. Or it could be said that even if he had been on guard, he was powerless. While vomiting blood, the Great Emperor's aura rapidly fell. A faintly discernible ray of light appeared at the huge wound, barely stopping the injury from worsening. But this was nothing more than a dying struggle. Qin Yi's strike had not only left a visible wound, but also the invisible foundation of the Great Emperor's. Mingyu staggered, turned around to face Qin Yi, and wiped the blood at the corner of her mouth. Although she was in a desperate situation, her expression did not change. Even in the face of life and death, she was still unmoved. Her dry lips parted as she said, "Is the demon territory really that good? If it were not for Qin Yi, the passage between the two realms would not have been opened. If it were not for Qin Yi, there would not have been a war between the Star Realm and the demon territory." It could be said that Qin Yi was mostly responsible for the current situation in the Star Realm. Qin Yi did not answer. His body that was wrapped in black gradually faded, slowly disappearing from this world. Just like how he had come without a trace, he had also left without a sound. Mingyu slowly shook her head, turned around, and faced the 12 demon saint. Her gaze swept past the faces of each demon saint, and finally settled on Huang Wuji. She said softly, "Mingyu can die without regrets after receiving everyone's guidance. Although this one is going to die here today, the light of my Mingyu will not be extinguished." Huang Wuji had one hand behind his back, and the other hand was slightly raised, making a pleased gesture. Mingyu smiled faintly. She stretched out her hand, and the moonlight sword appeared in her hand once again. When he glanced around, he saw that countless half-saints had already gathered around him. They were either looking at him openly or covertly, and the eyes of every single half-saint were filled with obvious greed and covetousness. Mingyu staggered, turned around, and gently waved the sword in her hand. Many half-saint retreated simultaneously, although Mingyu's aura had greatly decreased, and she no longer had the might of the great emperors. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Who knew how many half-saints she could kill before she died? Thus, although the many half-saint from different continents wanted nothing more than to rush over and kill Mingyu, none of them dared to act rashly. After all, it was not easy to be the first one to stand out. The demon saint's expressions were somewhat unsightly, but no one criticized her. After all, they also knew the fear of the half-saint. Tens of thousands of kilometers away, Yang Kai's spatial laws fluctuated, and he constantly teleported towards the battlefield. His heart was filled with extreme regret. If he had known this would happen, he would have taken Mingyu away a year ago. Although Xueli and the 12 Great Devil formations existed at that time, it was still much better than the current situation where the 12 demon saint were gathered. However, he also knew that Mingyu had not recovered from her injuries that day. She was simply not Xueli's match, and he definitely would not have been able to take Mingyu away. Now, he completely did not understand why the great emperors of Heaven's revelations wanted him to come to the demon territory to rescue Mingyu. Mingyu was in a completely hopeless situation, so what was the point of him coming here? Could it be that he was only here to witness the fall of one of the great emperors? On the battlefield, the 12 demon saint quietly watched. Mingyu's sword was in his hand as he strode through the void, spilling blood along the way. His aura was declining at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, as he moved forward, the half-saint in front of him continuously retreated. The oppressive atmosphere in the hearts of every half-saint was oppressive, as if a storm was about to arrive. Mingyu's concealed killing intent also made them feel as if there was a thorn in their backs. Suddenly, A half-saint was unable to endure this sort of torturous pressure any longer. He roared furiously as he pounced towards Mingyu, and then he smashed his fist down forcefully. Everywhere his fist came into contact with, space collapsed into pieces. Mingyu did not even raise her eyes, as she casually slashed forward with her sword. With a rumbling sound, the half-saint and Mingyu were actually in a deadlock for a moment, before being split in two. Sword rain poured down like a waterfall, and turned into a pile of fine powder. However, Mingyu also spat out a mouthful of blood, and her body slightly trembled. If it was at any other ordinary time, a half-saint being killed with a single strike was absolutely shocking news. And it was sufficient to deter all sorts of villains from acting rashly. But at this moment, not only were those half-saints not horrified, many of them revealed pleasantly surprised expressions instead. Seeing that she still didn't respond, she impatiently said, "If you have something to say, just say it. Don't try to be mysterious here." Bailey pondered for a moment and sighed. "I forget it. Who told me to be so kind?" These words almost made Ru Meng laugh, thinking that if Bailey was so kind, then there would be no evil people in this world. However, she felt that Bailey really had something to say to her, so she didn't want to go against her. "Where is your little man? Is he safe?" Bailey blinked her eyes at her. Ru Meng's expression changed. She quickly turned her head and looked in the direction of Yang Kai. The next moment, her divine sense spread out like a tide. After 10 breaths, she gritted her teeth and shouted, "You sang, you are courting death." When she finished speaking, her delicate body flashed, and she was about to rush over. But unexpectedly, a figure suddenly blocked her way. The person who came was tall, and had a head of fluttering red hair. His blood-red eyes emitted an evil light. Although his face was slightly pale, there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. Ru Meng slightly narrowed her eyes. "Shueli, what do you mean?" Shueli smiled indifferently. He didn't answer but asked, "Where are you going?" "What does where I go have to do with you? Get out of my way." Ru Meng shouted. Shueli slowly shook his head. "Mingyua's matter isn't over yet. You can't leave. You can only leave when Mingyua dies." Ru Meng said angrily. "Mingyua is already an arrow at the end of its flight. Why do you need to be so cautious? Also, I'm not leaving the Eternal Heaven continent. I can return very quickly." Shueli shook his head and said, "This is eldest Huang's intention. If you want to leave, you can ask him if he agrees." Hearing this, Ru Meng couldn't help but turn her head to look at Huang Wuji. However, she saw Huang Wuji's indifferent expression. Immediately, a feeling of unease grew in her heart. Huang Wuji was the #1 demon saint. He must have seen and heard what happened here, but he still didn't say anything. It was obvious that he tacitly agreed with Shueli's actions. But what was the point of all this? What good would it do them to make things difficult for her? In a flash, Ru Meng's beautiful face darkened. She said in a serious voice, "Yu Sang has joined you?" If that wasn't the case, why would Yu Sang return from the two-world battlefield without informing her? Why would she dare to kill Yang Kai in the first place? Moreover, he was lying in ambush on Yang Kai's path. He had already found a way out, so he had no scruples. Shueli grinned. "Don't make it sound so bad. That's not joining. Yu Sang is just returning to the clan. Don't forget, Yu Sang is a clansman of my blood demon clan. What do you want?" Ru Meng's face was so dark that it almost condensed water. Bailey chuckled and said, "We don't want to do anything. It's just that brat can repair and maintain the realm gate. He's very useful in our demon territory. Unfortunately, he seems to have been close to the 100-spirit continent recently. We need to teach him a lesson. Although he's from the star realm, he needs to know who's in charge in our demon territory." Hearing this, Ru Meng's heart sank. It seemed that Zhui Feng's appearance was very important to these guys. Before, they didn't care about him because of Mingyu. Now that Mingyu was an arrow at the end of its flight, they immediately attacked. As expected, they were ruthless. Biting her red lips, Ru Meng said coldly, "If anything happens to him, you'll definitely pay the price." "Io, Bailey Mo patted her full chest exaggeratedly. She smiled sweetly and said happily, "Little sister's angry look is really scary." Shueli smiled and said, "Don't worry, he won't die. I've already told you saying that he can only be injured but not killed. After all, there are still many realm gates in the demon territory that need his help. If he really is killed, it'll be a loss for us." With Shueli and Bailey Mo blocking the way, Yu Rumeng knew that she couldn't leave this place no matter what. Once Yang Kai fell into Yu Sang's hands, his life wouldn't be in danger, but he would be tortured. Yu Sang hated him to the bone. It could even be said that Yang Kai would be put under house arrest by the other demon saint in the future. When that time came, she would also be in a passive position. She cursed the stinking man in her heart for causing trouble for her. She had already told him to stay there and not act rashly. She didn't know why he had rushed over. Was the opportunity of a great emperor so easy to snatch? Now, he hadn't even seen the shadow of the opportunity and had fallen into someone else's trap. In the boundless sea of blood, Yang Kai's face was extremely gloomy. He turned his head and looked around. The entire world was blood red. The tumbling blood below was like the waves of the sea. Blood clouds gathered in the sky, blocking the extension of his vision. He was in a hurry to rush to Mingyu's great emperors. But he didn't expect to plunge into this sea of blood halfway, and then lose his sense of direction. With such an obvious method, Yang Kai naturally understood who was targeting him. Sweeping his cold eyes around, Yang Kai shouted in a deep voice, "Yu Sang, get out here!" Previously, because of Baijuo's arrival, Yu Sang was scared away. Yang Kai didn't expect him to not give up and attack him, while the other half-saint were snatching the opportunity. Compared to the hatred between them, Yang Kai felt that the opportunity on the other side was more attractive. He didn't know what was wrong with Yu Sang. There were blood clouds above and a sea of blood below. The middle was filled with blood qi. The blood qi was full of evil. When Yang Kai rushed in just now, he accidentally inhaled a mouthful of it. In an instant, he felt dizzy and almost fell into the sea of blood. Fortunately, he sealed all the pores on his body in time and held his breath. Only then did he feel a little better. He had already tried the space divine technique, but this strange place seemed to be a world of its own. If he couldn't break that barrier, he couldn't easily leave. The surroundings were quiet, and there was no movement at all. It was as if he was the only one in this world of blood. But Yang Kai knew that Yu Sang was definitely secretly observing him. He sneered and said, "You are a dignified half-saint. Do you need to hide like this? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" As soon as this was said, Yu Sang finally reacted. His erratic voice came from all directions. "This king couldn't do anything to you before because you had external forces to rely on. Now that you are alone, let's see what you have to stop this king." Yang Kai said indifferently, "In that case, just show yourself." "Why are you being so long-winded?" Bubbles appeared in the sea of blood, and Yu Sang's figure gradually emerged from the sea of blood. There was a sinister smile at the corner of his mouth. He was about to say something, but Yang Kai's figure had already flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Yu Sang. Even though Yu Sang's strength was far superior to Yang Kai's, he couldn't help but be surprised. He suddenly raised his head and looked. When their eyes met, the golden light in Yang Kai's left eye dissipated, and a majestic vertical hole appeared. Chapter 35-38. Using the Demon Eye of Annihilation and the Blossoming Lotus Secret Technique at the same time, a pure white lotus flower flashed and rushed into Yu Sang's mind. In an instant, Yu Sang's field of vision was filled with the pure white flower, and her divine sense uncontrollably rushed towards the flower, causing it to bloom layer by layer. Immediately after the flower bloomed, a blade light slashed across the sky, containing a terrifying killing intent. Demon Eye of Annihilation, Blossoming Lotus Secret Technique, Soul-Splitting Blade, and Void-Piercing Strike. In an instant, Yang Kai had used 4 killing moves in order to catch his opponent off guard. There was no other way. His opponent was a half-saint, and apart from making the first move, Yang Kai didn't have the ability to fight back. He even felt that even if he used all these methods, he wouldn't necessarily be able to do anything to his opponent. A scream rang out as Yu Sang raised her hand and struck Yang Kai's chest with her palm. The sound of bones breaking rang out, and a look of pain appeared on Yang Kai's face as he was sent flying like an arrow from a bow. While in mid-air, Yang Kai took a deep breath and summoned the mountains and rivers bell, which covered Yu Sang's head. With a crash, Yang Kai fell into the sea of blood, his clothes quickly corroded, and even his flesh couldn't resist the terrifying corrosive power. When he rushed out of the sea of blood, his body was covered in wounds, and there was not a single place that was intact. Fortunately, the recovery ability of a dragon bloodline body was incomparably strong, so these injuries weren't serious. On the other hand, Yu Sang had been caught off guard and lost the initiative, and was now trapped in the mountains and rivers bell. A world-suppressing aura spread out, and a violent sound came from the bell. Obviously, Yu Sang was trying to find a way to escape. At the same time, she gnashed her teeth and roared, "Yang Kai, I will tear you to pieces." Although she was flustered and exasperated, she was full of energy. Yang Kai was secretly speechless, using all 4 of his killer moves at the same time. Even a high-ranked demon king would be severely injured in an instant. But against a half-saint, that was all he could do. The gap in strength was really an irreparable gap. "Let's talk about it after you come out." Yang Kai coldly snorted. Suppressing the splitting headache, he formed a series of hand seals, causing the runes on the mountains and rivers bell to flicker and spin. The suppressive aura it exuded grew even stronger. Although continuously activating the power of the mountains and rivers bell consumed a great deal of Yang Kai's energy. If he did not do so, Yu Sang would soon be able to escape. Once he was free, Yang Kai would definitely not be his opponent. The Wind Chaser wasn't here, and neither was the embodiment. He was alone in this place. However, Yang Kai also knew that the Wind Chaser and the embodiment weren't far away. This was because they had hurriedly followed him when he had set off a moment ago. It was just that they weren't as fast as him. Perhaps they had already discovered the Blood Sea, and were trying to find a way to break through it. Both of them were half-Saint Realm cultivators, and were on par with Yu Sang. The Blood Sea probably wouldn't be able to stop them. In other words, as long as he could hold on for a while, he would have a chance to meet up with them. However, he couldn't pin all his hopes on them. Who knew what kind of tricks this Blood Sea had? Perhaps there was some unknown power that could delay the embodiment and the Wind Chaser. Therefore, while activating the power of the mountains and rivers bell, Yang Kai also spread out his divine sense to search for the flaws in the Blood Sea. However, after searching for a long time, he couldn't find any useful clues. This Blood Sea seemed to be a large array. Unless he found the array core, he couldn't break it. However, his divine sense seemed to have triggered some kind of restriction. In the surrounding sea of blood, huge bubbles kept rolling and bursting, causing the blood chi in the surroundings to become even denser. "Do you think that by trapping this king can't do anything to you?" Yu Sang's voice came from the mountains and rivers bell, mixed with endless ridicule and mockery. It was unknown when he stopped bombarding the mountains and rivers bell. He probably also noticed that this rare treasure was difficult to deal with. "I'll let you see the power of this king's bloodlight array." As soon as he finished speaking, accompanied by a crashing sound, a figure covered in blood suddenly jumped out of the Blood Sea. As soon as the figure appeared, it rushed toward Yang Kai at an extremely fast speed, arriving in front of him in the blink of an eye. Yang Kai took a closer look and couldn't help but be taken aback. This figure didn't have any vitality, and it was impossible to tell how long it had been dead. This figure was tall and had red eyes, and when it punched out, the sound of it breaking through the air could be heard. Yang Kai was caught off guard, and could only wave his fist to meet the attack. With a boom, when the two fists collided, Yang Kai's eyes widened. Feeling the tremendous force rushing toward him, he couldn't help but retreat more than 100 feet. On the other hand, the figure was also sent flying by his punch. Although the opponent's strength was not small, Yang Kai's strength was obviously greater. Walala. A series of crashing sounds rang out, as more than a dozen figures jumped out of the blood sea around him. Just like the figure from before, all of them were lifeless and had red eyes, but their appearances were different. After these figures appeared, they attacked Yang Kai without saying a word. Several of them circled around him, their bodies filled with blood-red light. One of them was covered in blood-red flames, which was very similar to the flame demon's natal divine technique. The other figures pulled away from Yang Kai, each of them reaching out to grab a bow. As they pulled the strings and knocked the arrows, countless blood-red streaks shot through the air like blood snakes, aiming for Yang Kai's vital points. Yang Kai was taken aback. He never expected that there would be such an ambush in this blood sea. Moreover, these people had clearly died long ago, but they were still able to display the abilities they had when they were alive. Not daring to be negligent, Yang Kai raised his hand and summoned his wind gourd. As his emperor chi surged, the wind gourd slashed out with astonishing gusts of wind. In an instant, with Yang Kai as the center, the area in front of him in a fan-shaped area became a land of death. Thud, thud, thud. Muffled sounds rang out. The wind was incomparably sharp, and it sliced through the figures one by one, cutting them into pieces. It was because the embodiment had appeared beside him without warning. He reached out and grabbed a blood corpse that was pouncing on him. He squeezed hard and crushed the blood corpse. Yang Kai shouted in a deep voice, "You sang, your time of death has come." This bloodlight array was indeed impressive. Not to mention the so-called 8,000 blood corpses lying in ambush in the blood sea, which could jump out and attack him at any time. Just the fact that it had formed a world of its own greatly restricted the use of his spatial divine arts. He could not teleport out without breaking this formation. However, inside this spirit array, his space spirit ability wasn't restricted much, and the same was true for the empty spirit bead. As one of his most powerful helpers, how could the embodiment not have the space spirit bead refined by Yang Kai? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.